Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City Council study session of Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. I now call the meeting to order. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please do the voice roll call?
Councilmember Reynolds. Here. Councilmember Chavez.
Here.
Councilmember Harper.
Here.
He's on. You can unmute.
Yeah, here.
Councilmember Harper.
Here. Can you hear me?
He's on.
He's on. Okay.
And
Let the record show that
thank you.
that in the spirit of this session, Dawn is on. Okay, so who's next?
Councilmember Gameros.
Here.
Councilmember Marr. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Harlan.
Here.
Mayor Stevens.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one study session item. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title?
Thank you. Economic and Development Services Department Overview and Special Project Update. Presentation by Ms. Lee et al., Director of Economic and Development Services.
All right, thank you very much. So like I just alluded to, it's study session, so everybody can be more relaxed and informal. First names apply, and the first thing we're going to do is hear from the public. We only have, I've been informed by Brenda, that we only have 2 people on Zoom, so unless anybody has an objection, we normally do 2 minutes, but I'm going to go to the regular 3 minutes for public comment. It doesn't look like we have too many people from staff, from the public that wish to comment in the chambers. So open it up to public comment. Anybody in the chambers who wishes to speak, you'll have 3 minutes, but you have to speak. It's exactly the opposite of the regular meeting. You can only speak about the matter that's on the study session agenda. Yes, did I forget something?
Did you want to have the presentation first?
No. Public comment first. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh, hold on one second. I need to get your mic going. Okay, yes.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Wendy Lease. I can boast about being an almost 51-year resident of our wonderful city. A lot of people might retire at this point and just say, go play golf, but I guess I can't. Because I do care about the future, so I appreciate, I've read the report and the various subject matters. Because I've benefited from the unique quality of life in Costa Mesa, raised a family of 5 here, and I'm compelled to be a voice for the future residents so that they can enjoy the same quality of life in Costa Mesa. I love the diversity, the entrepreneurial opportunities, the ocean breeze, the open spaces. But I am dismayed over the state mandated housing requirements, usurping local control by our elected officials. That's who you are. I think that it's shameful in a representative democracy that the state has decided that we need to have housing in a pretty built-out city. But I am joining the nonpartisan grassroots effort called Our Neighborhood Voices, where people of all parties all over California, big cities, little cities, medium cities, are opposing the housing mandates. I like the idea of that section about engagement. My recommendation has always been go the extra mile to get our citizens involved. Please don't say, oh, well, we tried and nobody showed up. The burden is really on you, especially in a post-COVID time that we're in. Figure out what are some innovative ways to get resident input. And the last thing, you didn't really address it, but it's in there, by virtue of part of our city, is parks. Post-COVID, we all need to spend more time outside to kind of make up for the 2 years or so that we were isolated. I particularly want to talk about Fairview Park, that it is a nature park and we want to preserve and protect it. That's what we voted for about 7 years ago. In your plans, be holistic and look at all our parks as valuable, not just focusing on this housing mandate and where are we going to put the housing and what's that effect going to be on the traffic and the infrastructure and our safety, our public safety. But people, we need nature more than ever. So as you're looking at these requirements and all the other things, the many other jobs that the staff, that they're asking for more staff will have to do, remember open space. And we preserve it, don't eliminate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Jim Fitzpatrick, resident of Costa Mesa, taxpayer in Costa Mesa, business here in Costa Mesa. This is a great topic for discussion to discuss how to make the entitlement process more efficient. Land use element 6.8 states provide efficient and timely review of development proposals while maintaining quality customer service standards for the business development and residential community. In the past, Measure X cannabis entitlements were processed in 4 to 6 months. Measure Q cannabis timing is stretched out to at least a year and now looks to be potentially more. Those are facts. And it's not just cannabis, it's all entitlements are not being processed expeditiously. Rather than lower the bar in the standards and pivot to a lower production level, let's keep in mind that we have Measure K on the horizon, and we need to be seeking solutions to improve this important processing goal. Staff has communicated to the cannabis industry an intent to additionally slow the cannabis applications to only 1 CUP hearing per month. Was this a council policy decision? I've not seen this publicly discussed, and if not, the policy change needs to be discussed in an open meeting decided by the entire council. Let's get this on the agenda to discuss. We need to consider policies the city implemented, like social equity and Measure X partnerships, and how such policies will impact those other city policies. Applicants that have been given guidance to expect, let's say, an April or May planning commission date, we can't let that slip into 2024 now. It's a good move to poll the applicants to see where we're active. We don't have 63 applicants. It's irresponsible to talk about 63 applicants. If the city transparently communicates the application status, some will realize it does not make sense to continue their super high carrying costs. And if the city implements a return of fees program for those that wish to withdraw applications, the number will be much lower. We need policy changes that apply for things like the Permit Streamlining Act, which we no longer follow. If we were to do that, we would collapse the cycle of entitlements. We need a policy to improve customer service requiring staff to respond to applicants in a timely period. Any of these policy changes should be voted on by the entire city council. And I just want to make the case here that it's not cannabis, right? The last planning commission meeting, we had an applicant here for a small lot 2-home housing application who basically said, I don't know what's going on. This is the longest process I've ever done an entitlement. It took me from one market to now I can't get construction financing. I'm not sure if this is ever going to be done. But if we're going to talk about Measure K and we can't do a 2-house small lot ordinance, we're kidding ourselves if we don't make material changes. There was a veterinary thing on 17th Street. Took over a year to get that entitlement. It's not cannabis. We have a great staff. We need to give them the tools. You need the tools so you can see accountability and visibility to, is this process efficient? And I'd love to work with both council and staff to make this process more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else in the chambers who wishes to speak. On Zoom, do people wish to do a public comment?
Yes, Cynthia McDonald, please.
Ms. McDonald, welcome. You have the floor.
Hold on, Ms. McDonald. We can hear in the control room, but we can't hear here in the council chambers. Can you try speaking now, Ms. McDonald? Let's see. Can you try speaking now, Ms. McDonald? I'm not sure what's wrong with our microphones.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak on Zoom?
No, we just have that one individual.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Can you fix it in a short period of time, or is it going to take a bit of time?
I'm not quite sure. I need to go back to the control room.
Okay, fair enough. Why don't we do this? Why don't we go on with the step? Okay, that's fine. So Tony is going to go back and help Cynthia to get on. And then what we'll do is we'll go on with the staff presentation. And when we've solved the problem, I'm sure, Ms. McDonald or Cynthia in this context will stick around. And then when it's ready, let's pause and give her an opportunity to have her 3 minutes. Okay? Just to keep things moving. Fair enough? Okay, so now we have the staff presentation. Jennifer, you're on. Oh, unless, Lorianne, do you want to say something to lead up to Jennifer? Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us this evening. We're really excited to bring this presentation to you. As you know, this is the second in a series of presentations that we'll be making from our various departments to the Council in anticipation for two very important processes that we'll be undergoing in the next several months. First, we'll have our strategic planning session and retreat for the City Council on Friday, March 10th. And so we're hoping that some of the information that's provided by the departments about their operations, their roles and responsibilities, the projects that they're overseeing will be helpful in the context of those deliberations in terms of goal setting, setting for objectives, and also giving us feedback on priorities. We're also hoping that it'll be a good opportunity for us also to do a little bit more education, explanation on just the day-to-day operations that are happening in each of the departments and the scope and breadth and depth of the work that they do. The team that you have here tonight from Development Services is in different disciplines, and they'll all be speaking to their respective pieces of the puzzle and the different divisions that they oversee. And then, of course, as we go into the budget-making process, which we've already started at the staff level, but will be coming to you in April and May, and then for a June adoption, that will also help to set the stage for some of those conversations. And so we have a lengthy presentation for you this evening. There is a natural point where you might want to consider a brief break if you need that. But we did want to give you as much information as possible leading up to the retreat and then also budget making. And so we were hoping to get some feedback tonight whenever you can give it to us. If it's more appropriate at the strategic planning retreat, that will work in terms of some of the high priority projects, in particular for this department, given the scope of the actual high priority projects that they have, the timelines for those, and the overlap with staff. And so either tonight or at the retreat, we'd love to get some feedback from you on that. And then again, as we move into the department budget making process, also talk about challenges and opportunities and some staffing changes that we think would help in terms of meeting your goals and objectives and ensuring that, we're aligned in that regard. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our outstanding Development Services Director, Jennifer Lee, for the presentation. Thank you.
So couple questions. Any luck getting Cynthia on?
Let's test again. Cynthia, can you speak? If you could try again now? No, we're still having issues.
Okay, still having problems. And then did I hear right that you anticipate we're going to do a break within the presentation?
It's up to you, Mayor, but yes, there's a natural breaking point if you would like to take a break at that point.
Okay.
Up to you.
So this is like the Gone with the Wind of staff presentations. All right. You know what? Take it away, Scarlett. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Jennifer Lee, I'm the Director of Economic and Development Services for the City of Costa Mesa, and it is my pleasure this evening to kick off our study session presentation regarding the department's operations and also to provide an overview of our major projects. This evening, just to give a brief overview of the presentation, I'll be discussing our budget, give a staffing overview. We'll be talking about individual department operations and divisions. We'll go into high priority projects and then end with a discussion of challenges, opportunities, and next steps. The role of the department is really to provide professional recommendations to the council and to serve the community in every stage of the land development process. In the department, we have 5 operational teams. They're planning and zoning, economic development, building safety, community improvement, and housing and community development. Each team has a role in ensuring that land development in the city is high quality, safe, and reflective of the community standards that the council adopted as part of the general plan and municipal code. The department has a budget of $8.5 million, as well as $1.5 million in restricted federal funds. There are 48 full-time positions in the department distributed among the 5 operational teams. Leading up to and after the pandemic, the department had persistent turnover and vacancies due to retirements, as well as outdated compensation packages that made us less competitive with adjacent jurisdictions. In fact, in the last 3 years, over 40% of the department's positions turned over and experienced vacancies. With the compensation studies and adjustments approved by the council over the last few years, we were able to engage in competitive recruitment processes, and I'm happy to report that department staffing has stabilized and the majority of the positions are now filled, with only 3 remaining vacant. I want to thank the council for supporting the department during this transitional period coming out of the pandemic, and it is through the council and the city manager's leadership and support in the last few years that we are positioned to provide the highest level of customer service to our residents and businesses moving forward. This fiscal year has been a banner year for the department. The department is processing more permits, plan checks, and inspections than ever. Our day-to-day tasks are on target to exceed our previous record-setting year in fiscal year 21-22. And even year-to-date permit processing has shown that we're well on our way to exceeding those projections from last year. In addition to our day-to-day operations, we are also responding to state mandates, as well as ensuring that we can move forward with city council priorities. And ensuring that all this work can be done will require additional staff resources. Before we move on to our individual divisions, I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce the department's leadership team. Each will provide an overview of their division operations as well as highlights. First, I want to introduce Mr. Scott Drapkin. He's our Assistant Director, and he manages the Planning and Zoning Division in addition to being second in command for the department. We also have Mr. Ziad Dudar, who is our building official and manages the city's Building Safety Division. Mr. Fidel Gamboa is our Community Improvement Manager, and he manages the city's Community Improvement Division. And we have Mr. Dan Inlows, who leads the department's Economic Development Operation. I'd also like to introduce the newest addition to our leadership team, who's in the audience today, Paivan Nathawanjwangsi. She is our principal planner and is an amazing addition to the team, and we're happy to have her. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Drapkin for an overview of planning and zoning operations.
Good evening, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. The Planning Division staff includes 11 full-time employees. The Planning Division has 2 primary functions, which include current planning and long-range planning. Costa Mesa current planning efforts includes assisting customers with building permits for their homes and businesses, and assisting customers with opening new businesses and expanding existing businesses. Other facets of current planning include reviewing requests for land divisions, as with large and small new home developments, and also ensuring that new development is consistent with best environmental practices and the city's circulation goals and policies. Long-range planning efforts address matters concerning the quality of life, growth, open space, and the environment within the city of Costa Mesa. Long-range planning efforts support ongoing land development activities by conducting special long-range studies, as well as in-depth investigations and analysis of planning issues that affect the city and its community. The city's long-range planning efforts focuses on long-range plans that typically encompass an entire area of the city, such as the city's numerous specific and urban plans. For example, the reuse of the Fairview Development Center is considered a long-range planning effort. This effort will likely conclude in a new specific plan in the city for this area. In addition, the efforts for visioning and changing certain areas of the city to be able to meet the city's regional housing needs requirement is also a long-range planning effort. The Planning Division is also the primary city staff that works with the state and regional entities to ensure that the city's general plan and zoning codes are consistent with the state mandates adopted every year by the state and federal governments. For example, the Planning Division has worked directly with the HCD to update the city's housing element and to be in compliance with the state and obtain the required state certification. The Planning Division is now down to the last remaining housing issue before the state certification of this extensive process is concluding. The Planning Division also recently worked with the HCD to update the city's ADU requirements to be in compliance with state law, which is changing regularly. The Planning Division also works directly with the John Wayne Land Use Airport Commission to ensure that the city's development provisions are consistent with safe airport land use practices. Lastly, planning staff works with Caltrans to ensure that the city's land use provisions are consistent with regional transportation planning goals for its several freeways that bisect the community. The city's planning staff are responsible for administering the city's long-range land use plan. Land use is one of the most important factors in city administration as it is the basis for how a city looks and feels. Land use also directly dictates a city's business environment and places where the community lives and plays. As shown on this slide, the different colors on this city's land use map represents the city's diverse land use scheme. The city includes approximately 30 zoning districts and urban and specific plans. Each one of these districts is supported by an ordinance with specific provisions that basically acts as an instruction book for how these specific areas look and feel. Look and feel for these zoning districts includes the regulation of the allowed uses, minimum setback, structure height, density, floor area ratio, open space, landscaping, parking, and much more. Similar to the diverse population of the people who live in the city of Costa Mesa, the city's land use scheme is also extremely diverse. As great as the city of Costa Mesa is, many of the city's land use provisions were adopted decades ago and have fallen slightly behind the needs of the city, including providing for housing and the changing business and retail environments. Some of the impacts of these older land use provisions have resulted in lack of reinvestments from property owners, especially along several of the city's commercial corridors. Similar to all local cities, with the most recent state requirements for housing and different state mandates regarding other land use regulations, the city of Costa Mesa must take another look at its land use provisions and see how it can change to better serve the community in the future. As part of the Planning Division current planning efforts, the planning staff processes numerous entitlements for decision maker approval. Typically, the applications require staff to prepare a 10 to 20 page staff report and work extensively with applicants to modify use and development proposals to be in compliance with the city's general plan and zoning code. As one example, this year the planning staff processed 17 cannabis retail storefronts for Planning Commission review, and each one of these applications required months of work with the new business owners in coordination with other city and state department staff. In addition, staff provided 3 study sessions to update the Planning Commission on the cannabis regulations and get the commission ready for review at public hearings. The planning staff also toured the Planning Commission to several operating cannabis retail facilities in Santa Ana. In the last year, the planning staff assisted customers and prepared reports for 30 zoning administrator projects, 38 Planning Commission projects, and 16 council projects. The types of projects that the planning staff have worked on in the last year include numerous deviations for parking requirements for new and expanding uses, more than 17 cannabis retail storefronts, approximately a half a dozen cannabis distributors and manufacturing uses, subdivisions for several small housing developments, a new school to repurpose the vacant 24-hour fitness gym, a new convenience market, an affordable housing condition modification to one of the city's affordable housing communities, several second-story residential additions, outdoor seating with valet parking at an existing restaurant, a new large adult daycare center, an indoor axe throwing use, a new veterinary clinic, and many more. The city's planning staff also administered the city's very successful accessory dwelling unit housing program. Specifically, this program has resulted in the development of 68 additional ADU housing units in the city last year and is on track this year to double last year's ADU production. In addition to the many reports and presentations that 11 planning staff complete, the city's planning staff are also responsible for providing daily public counter assistance to customers and responding to numerous daily customer questions by phone and emails. In the last 3 years, the planning staff have served more than 5,000 customers in this capacity. During this time, the planning staff have maintained an average wait time of approximately 16 minutes and has improved customer serving time from 12 to 7 minutes. I will now pass the mic over to Ziad, who is our city's building official, for a summary of the city's building department operations.
Zia, before you go, let's take another stab and see if we can get Cynthia on for a public comment.
Cynthia, can you try speaking? Can you try now, Cynthia? Oh, okay. How about Councilmember Harper? Could you try speaking, please?
Can you hear me, Brenda?
Looks like we don't have it fixed yet. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. You don't, study sessions mean never having to say you're sorry. Go ahead. You have the floor, sir.
Good evening,
If
Mayor.
you're keeping score, that's my second movie reference.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council members. I am Ziad Dudar, the building official for the City of Costa Mesa, and I'm here to give you an overall view about the functions and the operations of the Building and Safety Department. We are in the Building Safety Department. We provide all the permit issuance for all type of projects. We implement and enforce the state building codes and standards in addition to the Costa Mesa Municipal Code standards. We recently have adopted the new 2022 California building codes, and we're providing adequate training for all our staff to be abreast with the latest development. We also provide plan check services, coordinates review of construction plans with all other city departments. The number of building permits that we issued from this fiscal year to date, all the building combination is about 583 permits, and the building miscellaneous permits about 661, electrical permits about 289, mechanical permits 162, plumbing about 106, and signage 62 permits, and roofing 219 permits. So we also provide the customer service at the counter, and we have served about 12,483 customers in the past 3 years, with an average serving time for each customer about 29 minutes, and the average wait time for each customer is about 30 minutes. Within the last year, we have serviced about 8,988 customers, with an average serving time of each customer is about 28 minutes, and average wait time is about 32 minutes. In the Building and Safety Division, we also have the Inspection Department, and the Inspection Department is responsible to protect the Costa Mesa residents and businesses by enforcing codes that establish minimum requirements to safeguard the public health, safety, and general welfare for our residents, and to provide access to persons with disabilities, and to promote energy conservation, and to ensure reasonable level of safety to emergency responders during emergency operations. The City of Costa Mesa inspectors' average workload is about 60 site visits per inspector per day. And that's about 12 inspections per inspector per day. Sometimes in the fiscal year 2022, we have performed about 11,457 inspections. And for the fiscal year 22 to date, we have performed about 7,950 inspections. In the Building and Safety Division, the division conducts damage assessment also and determines the building safety following a major disaster. Investigations include building construction, illegal conversions, disabled access, other building safety-related complaints generated by the public. This year alone, the inspection division has issued about 6 red tags and about 7 yellow tags. Yellow tags meaning that they have limited access to the building structure. Red tag meaning the building is completely unsafe to enter. And overall, this has been an exceptionally productive year. Building and inspection staff have been enormously busy and fully committed and dedicated to provide excellent customer service to our customers and to our residents in the city of Costa Mesa. We are fully committed to maintain a safe and healthy environment in the city of Costa Mesa. With that said, I would like to hand over the rest of the presentation to Mr. Fidel Gamboa for our community improvements. Thank you.
Fidel, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor Stevens and the rest of the council. I'm very happy to be here because this gives us a good opportunity to kind of give an oversight of what we do. Often code enforcement and community improvement isn't quite out there in people's mind other than a negative aspect, but the truth is that the reason we exist is because of all of the things that the director and the other two gentlemen explained of what they do for the city. Our role is really to go out and make sure that all the things that this council and previous councils has approved over the years continues to be maintained in the way it was approved, making sure that things don't get out of order, that we are making sure that we give feedback, especially to some of those approvals. And a lot of these things are specifically under our municipal code, but also adopted codes, such as the International Property Maintenance Code and the Health and Safety Code. The way that we do this currently is with a staff of 12 field officers, and I've got 2 or 3 other individuals in the office. But we do various things throughout the community that have to do with our rules and regulations. We identify those things that have not been approved by our departments. And I often joke that I bring customers to the planning department and the building department because we catch people who basically didn't ask for permission first. So we're really busy. But part of what we do is that we look at all of the things that are occurring in our city. You know, I have been an employee of the city for 30 years. And over the 30 years, I've seen the city change quite a bit. At one time, I was the only code enforcement officer in the city. Right now, we have 12. And the purpose of the 12 is not just for basic, property maintenance issues. Some of the things that have been approved in the city have become very complex, and they need a higher level of review from our staff. So what we do is we provide education to our staff members to understand the whole processes that are being run through. We have educated them in better documentation so that when we are challenged, when something is being brought forward, we hope to prevail because we want to make sure that we're doing everything the way it was meant to be. And quite honestly, during our educational process, we've invited other cities to join us. And we've been told by other cities, other supervisors, that they are amazed at our program because they have never seen such a progressive and fast, forward-thinking approach. And quite honestly, that is mimicking what we do as a city. So I'm very proud of the team that we have. But our team is not a standalone team. It's really a team in conjunction with all the different divisions and development services. So the enforcement we do, like I stated, is specifically in our municipal code and other local and state federal codes. Not each complaint or violation we found is a standalone issue. Sometimes people think, well, you know, that person only did this. But the truth is that the purpose for us to do investigations is to determine, you know, not only what that violation is, but what other things are affecting it. If you look at the photos in this slide here, this is actually a case from a hoarding case we had. This was a report that was made to us from the neighbors. It was in a townhome type of situation. When we investigated, of course, our first concern had to do with the condition of the property because that was being reported. But as we moved forward, we started to understand that this particular person needed more from us than just a notice saying, hey, clean up your situation. This person actually had some mental issues. Eventually, it was determined that she was schizophrenic. And that required us to bring in other agencies, such as the Orange County Health Department. But because of the complexity of the issue, we needed to push further than what we normally do, and we had to bring this into a judicial review to basically help this individual. Because quite honestly, the whole point of what we do is really not to punish, but to really make a better environment. And this person deserved to be in a better environment. So we brought that to light to the courts. They helped us by bringing it to receivership. And eventually we got everything cleaned up. And we ended up getting her with her family to add the benefit of more resources for her. If you look at this slide, the picture here, I put a map of the city and populated with the calls that we get. You know, this is actually over a period of 3 years, but on average, we're looking at 1,000 to 1,200 concerns submitted to my division. And these are submitted through our Costa Mesa, My Costa Mesa application. We have a duty desk that we want to make sure that we're available, so we're not always in the field. So if someone just walks in, they can come straight up and talk to us. We have information on the website. We have emails. But regardless, we like to take the information. And the big joke with us as staffers is that everybody calls us, even when it really has nothing to do with us. But the truth is that our policy is that we don't turn people away if it doesn't particularly have to do with code enforcement. The public is reaching out to us, and we want to be able to help them regardless of what that is. So, you know, my staff knows to bring that information to the right department. So if it happens to be a parks issue, then we try to get into the parks issue. If it's a public service issue, we try to get in there. Because nobody wants to call the city and get the runaround. I'd rather have them delivered directly where they need to be. So, now, one of the goals with the enforcement, you know, although we have 1,000 to 1,200 a year, the goal is not to fine and punish. You know, our goal from the very beginning has always been to get people to comply voluntarily. So our staff is trained, and as I was talking about this earlier, our staff is trained in a manner that we bring forward all the resources we have to those individuals that may not, quite honestly, know that they're causing a violation or that they need help. And so the point is, if we can get that done, then we're doing our job, because this is a community of individuals. We're not trying to make a separation between one and the other. But unfortunately, in some cases, we do have to move through our enforcement tools, which includes civil citations. I think on average, sometimes every year we're writing about $200,000 worth of citations. And it's unfortunate, because we'd rather have those monies used towards having things fixed. And sometimes that's the conversation we have individuals prior to even moving in that direction. In addition to the everyday type of violations, because of the more complex things that are occurring, approvals that occur, it's really drawing code enforcement into areas that we weren't never involved before. More recently, we started helping with the cannabis enforcement in the city. So we took on a couple different roles here. Number one, we are helping with the police department for those illegal locations in our city. Unfortunately, as soon as the word got out that we were going to start moving in that direction to allow legal ones, we started having the illegals come in, illegal dispensaries and illegal manufacturing and grows. So we help the police with that. And the reason we're involved is because although we're talking about an approval for a state-approved action, what happens with these locations, it's really a land use violation. They're not supposed to be there in the first place, but that also causes things like building code violations. You know, they do illegal electrical work because there's no oversight by the city. There's never approval. And in some situations, it creates such a dangerous situation that we've had fires at some of these locations. But in addition to that, we have concerns about, you know, why are these individuals bringing this product into the city? Is it safe? Well, no, that's why we have a program to do it legally and safe through our city, you know, so that the community gets the benefit of these programs. But in addition to the illegal ones, we're also tasked with looking at the legal ones. And just like all the other approvals, other things in the municipal code, the point is to make sure that they're complying with the conditions that were set forth in their approvals. We do quarterly inspections of a lot of the locations. And then we sometimes do unannounced inspections. The intent is really to make sure that they're producing the information that we need as part of their permit, and also giving feedback to the planning department about what we see out there. One of the things that our division decided to do several years ago was that when we looked at the number of violations coming into the city, we realized that sometimes when we approached these individuals who are causing a violation, they really didn't know why they were in violation. And quite honestly, when I go home at the end of the day, I don't know what's going on in my city. I know more about this city than I know in my own city. So we decided that we really needed to start doing more of a community approach. And a lot of this came around by doing neighborhood cleanups, presenting ourselves in other events like concerts in the park, and volunteering. And during these times, these opportunities is when we're giving out information to let the public understand who we are. Really with the hope that if we educate them, then maybe before they decide to put that couch on the sidewalk, they go, you know what, I can call the waste management company to come pick it up. That helps us not have to write a notice and write a citation or try to chase down. So it's a good thing. It's working out really well. In recent times, we've had 3 of these neighborhood cleanups in the Shalimar James area, Fillmore Coolidge, Mission Mendoza. But on top of that, we provide the links on our website so that they can have better access to us. Because going back to my comment about making the phone call, I think that the public needs to understand where we're at and what we do. So with that, I'm going to move it over to Mr. Inles to overview the economic development.
Good evening, everyone. I think we're going to be talking about the economic strategic plan later, but with that in my mind, I'm thinking of an oceanographer that said exploration is the engine that drives innovation. Innovation drives economic growth. So let's go exploring. And I'm super excited about that new effort that we're kind of going into, but that wouldn't have been possible without this last year setting a good amount of framework for that effort. We have, as a department, pursued economic growth. Obviously, as one member of the economic development team, I'm proud of everything that we've been trying to accomplish this last year and what we've successfully accomplished. One of those is streamlining applications and approval processes, continuing our commitment from COVID to allowing for electronic submittals, even though we do not have our land management system fully submitted and kind of up and running, which is something I'll be talking about later as well. Continuing to market Costa Mesa to be a place that's open for business and a regional nationwide attraction to Southern California. Improving business climate within the city and encouraging our Shop Local program, which we did heavily during COVID and continue to do so in all of our efforts with our partners throughout our region. And many additional actions that really try to focus on capturing opportunities. And that's really what our responsibility is in economic development. Find opportunities and be flexible enough to move. And that's really what we try to do as a kind of a concierge service with the businesses that are going through expansion or coming to the city of Costa Mesa. We've done many different approaches for a variety of different businesses, whether that's supporting them substantially through the pre-application process before they even submit, working with them to find creative ways in which they can expand their existing footprint on their lot, finding ways to dedicate staff from the application submittal all the way to construction and beyond, providing a direct point of contact at the leadership level, or providing flexibility and even regular meetings with some of the larger developments that are seeking for phased development and in a highly complex development of over, say, 600,000 square feet of building space. We've also expedited review, so for some of our high-volume shopping centers, and in our efforts to reach out and market the city, I've attended regularly the ICSC, which has borne fruits. First, kind of the two examples I have is Raising Cane's, which was, when it came to the city of Costa Mesa, it was the first in the state of California, and it was #1 for several years in actual sales. And then Shake Shack, which is in the development phase and going through its plan check and entitlements as we speak. But we also want to support the businesses that are here in the city of Costa Mesa, and we do this through interviews, through partnerships with the Chamber of Commerce, through Travel Costa Mesa, and as well as listening to them in those interviews. And what many of them talk about is having a blind spot when it comes to being able to compare themselves with other businesses. And so one of the tools that we secured and launched on the city website and have updated consistently is our Business Insight tool, which allows businesses to conduct comparative analytics. They can know how many other businesses are in the area, where their market might be for those that are interested in their type of product. How many employees on average do other businesses of their size hire? This information would normally come at great cost, and we provide it through this application free for them to be able to make smart choices about their business. We also continue to provide a site selection tool. This site selection tool allows for our businesses that are already in Costa Mesa to look up freely to see if they're ready to expand, to find another space that might be suitable for them within the city so that they can stay in the city of Costa Mesa. And both of these tools are well used. As noted on the slide, the Business Insight tool has about 1,000 reports pushed from it monthly from small businesses throughout our community. But it doesn't go without saying that there is some kind of a recovery post-COVID. During COVID, this council and our department conducted extraordinary efforts that were recognized by the Golden Hub and many other organizations, including the LA Times, to make sure that our businesses were able to survive through that period. Multiple town hall meetings, Restore Costa Mesa meetings, temporary outdoor permits, businesses that were surveyed and asked on how we could help and be most beneficial to them, and then we respond with universal signage or local shop local programs or campaigns, and then obviously direct support through the two grant programs that were initiated during that time. But that also goes without saying that that was a substantial work effort that kind of expanded the scope and scale of what our department had previously done for businesses in the city of Costa Mesa. And now those resources, those contacts, and those partnerships, we're finding ways in this last several years to find creative ways in which we can leverage those resources in more sustainable and long-term fashion, and especially funnel them into the economic development strategic plan. But we also talked about opportunities, and one of the biggest opportunities that we've found is in modernization, in helping us be able to amplify our reach and increase our efficiency. And in the way that we've found to do that is in partnering with applications and systems. We were able to secure WaitWhile, which helped us with our queuing at the city. This increased our service time, provided flexibility for individuals not having to sit and wait in our second floor lobby, which while it's beautiful, it's maybe not as attractive as a nearby coffee shop. We instituted and launched the e-plan review through Bluebeam that allowed for us to do electronic plan reviews, which saves the customer on paper on having to print multiple versions of plans or sets of plans. We launched and improved our GIS capacities, both in the data that's in the layers, but also the layers themselves to provide for faster responses and more reliable data sets. And then obviously increased our capacity for intellectual reach into real estate analytics and mobile analytics so that we can make informed decisions on how we want to proceed with producing a balanced supply of personal services throughout the city, which is the #1 complement that businesses and residents talk about in Costa Mesa, and it cannot be understated. It's definitely something that we all should be proud of. And our business community is the backbone that provides those personal services. And then obviously our land management system, which I'm sure you're all well aware of. We've been working on this system, and it is definitely going to be a game changer. It's a citywide implementation that's going to increase customer satisfaction and transparency because they'll be able to submit applications online and engage continuously through the process through that portal. We'll be able to decrease our costs and burden on the back end with being able to transfer all of our important documents readily into our content management system so they're easy to search and recover. And we'll just increase access and sustainability by having a system that's citywide. So no longer will each of these departments have their own software, but I'll be able to freely look into the progress that Fidel's team is making or Ziad's team is making on any given project that they're working on because they'll be integrated and linked to all the work we're doing on our department, which is great. And the estimated go live for this system, which is up and running and being tested, the estimated go live for this is summer of this year. So we're very excited about the work that's gone on this last year. It's taken well over 40 of our staff members and several consultants to complete this work. Lastly, is our partners and programs. As mentioned, we have a considerable number of partners that help us amplify our reach for economic development. With 1FT, this is how we help make sure we get our work done. We've got the Chamber of Commerce and Travel Costa Mesa and South Coast Metro Alliance, which help us with the Costa Mesa Business Assistance Collaborative. The Green Business Network is who's helping and assisting us in allowing businesses that want to declare themselves as green to sign up and participate in that effort. And we've used CalEd and their subsidiaries to help with creative financing through TEFRA for the OCMA as well as Vanguard University. All of these helping us be able to realize the building footprint that we have in Costa Mesa and the business community that's here. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jennifer.
All right, so we're going to wrap up this section of our presentation with just a few more slides here and then offer to take a little break. Just before we move on to the last slide, I'd like to note that although we didn't include it in our PowerPoint presentation this evening, I wanted to highlight that we also house our Housing and Community Development Operation, which administers our federal CDBG and home grants on the order of $1.5 million annually. That team supports the city's Public Service Grants Committee and awards and administers grant agreements for about 10 community service organizations a year, including Project Hope Alliance, Trellis, Mercy House, Meals on Wheels, and many, many more. They also administer our home rehab grant and loan program, a tenant-based rental assistance program, and they evaluate and award home loan funds for affordable housing projects citywide. They are an amazing team, and they work with our community improvement team as well as the city manager's office to connect housing funding resources with those who need it most in the community. So with that, and as I said at the beginning of this presentation, this department has really had a banner year in terms of our development workload, including plan review, permitting, and inspections, which are at an all-time high. We have issued over 3,000 building permits, done 12,000 inspections, and are on track to process over 100 individual development projects through various decision-making bodies here at the city. And we are on track to exceed those numbers this year already, even though we're, a bit way into the fiscal year, but not quite there yet. So this is really indicative of a longer-term trend that we're seeing in terms of just elevated requests for development projects and expectations in our community that are just higher for customer service. And we've always struggled, certainly recently in this department, with technology and perhaps citywide. But with the addition of recent technology like WaitWhile, which allows our customers to make appointments for our public service counter, and with the launch of our LMS system as well, we are able to track and verify the data that we talked about today, and we'll be able to do that even more so with the launch of our land management system in summer of this year. So in addition to all of our day-to-day operations, we've also completed several council priorities and special projects. Just to name a few, implementing our COVID-related business recovery program, 2 significant ballot measures in 24 months, our housing element local adoption, launching our new cannabis retail program, accessory dwelling unit ordinances and permits, and temporary ordinances for outdoor dining and short-term rentals as well, just to name a few. So that concludes the first part of our presentation. The second part will be focused on our upcoming major projects and a discussion of council priorities. So Mayor, if you'd like, we can break now.
Sure. What's the time estimate of the second?
20 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Council, you want to do a break or not? You want to push forward? We need to get to the interactive part. Okay. So, can you do it? Can you go through it kind of quick?
Sure.
Thanks.
All right. So the second part of our presentation is really to review the status of a number of high priority projects that the council has identified as priorities, as well as some state law mandates that the city is obligated to respond to. So first, before we get to the council priorities, and I won't go through these in any great detail, but to highlight for council's awareness, this was a very prolific year for the state legislature to to be kind. And there have been no shortage of state laws that will require the city to update its general plan as well as its municipal code. So to name a few, we are required to update our general plan safety element, as well as the environmental justice policies throughout our general plan, update our circulation element, as well as our open space element to respond to various state laws. So that in and of itself will be a very heavy project for us. We also are required to update our municipal codes to respond to state laws regarding local parking standards, both commercial and residential, to update our residential development standards for multifamily housing in commercial and industrial areas. There are some requirements, very specific requirements as to our local development process, as well as a series of density bonus updates that are required by state law. All of these have various due dates, but most of them became effective either January 1st or they will become effective July 1st of this year. So those are our timelines to respond to some of these mandates. We've already talked a bit about the housing element, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what I wanted to highlight is that as you all know, we started this process several months ago and are required to plan for 11,760 housing units. We started with community outreach. At this point, we have local adoption of our housing element in February and again in November of last year. And as Scott mentioned, we are on our last round of discussions with the State Housing and Community Development Department and are awaiting HCD certification. Even when we get certification, that housing element outlines 47 programs, and most of those programs have an expectation within the housing element of being completed within the first 3 years of the 8-year planning period. So this is going to take a significant allocation of our staff resources. Following up on Measure K, as you all know, Measure K was passed by voters in November of 2022, last year. The objective, of course, was to provide for affordable housing opportunities and revitalize key commercial and industrial corridors. Our intent is to kick off this process very soon. We have prepared a request for proposals. We intend to retain a consultant team that is specialized in community engagement and visioning and can handle a lot of the urban planning challenges that we face and that many cities in California face at this point. Our first steps will be kicking off that community engagement and visioning process. Ultimately, it will require us to update our general plan, multiple elements of our general plan, to update multiple specific plans in Costa Mesa and urban plans, to update our zoning code standards, including a lot of the standards that we talked about this evening that really define the look and feel of different areas of the city, and to make sure that those standards match with the community expectations and standards that we all discuss here. And ultimately, it will also require compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. So we expect that to be a very staff and really consultant team intensive effort. We will be focusing on corridors that were identified both for housing opportunities as well as for key revitalization of our commercial corridors. Newport Boulevard, Harbor, the area north of the 405, the Sobeka area, as well as our commercial and industrial corridors along 17th, 19th, Placentia, Baker, Pomona, Bristol, just to name a few. In addition, we will be moving forward with planning for the Fairview Development Center site. As you know, the city secured $3.5 million in state funds to plan and zone the Fairview Development Center for housing, and the timeline for completing that effort by agreement is 3 years. We executed the city-state agreement in December of last year. We've prepared a request for proposals that we'll be releasing at the end of this month to get a qualified consultant on board. Our next steps with that process as well are to kick off community outreach and visioning forums for that site, and ultimately that planning effort will take a general plan update a specific plan for the Fairview Development Center property, and ultimately compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act as well. And lastly, for the Fairview Development Center, we are also coordinating with the state regarding a Cal OES facility located on the FTC property as well. Regarding the inclusionary housing ordinance, we have completed a draft feasibility analysis. This project was ultimately delayed while we were finishing up some other of the council priorities that took a little longer than we expected. But our next steps with that process is to engage in community outreach, ultimately to meet with the council's housing ad hoc committee, have some policy discussions, and then prepare an ordinance and program guidelines that will be presented to the Planning Commission as well as the City Council at public hearings. One of the council's identified priorities is also the Senior Center Housing Project. We have 60 affordable senior housing units proposed on that site. We have completed a use, access, and parking study for the site, and underway are the urban plan screening and master plan applications from Jamboree Housing. They're proposing a land division that will be fleshed out a little bit more over some upcoming discussions, as well as an affordable housing agreement and a lease agreement, which are all in process. Ultimately, that project will be presented to the Planning Commission and City Council at public hearings. One of the council's identified priorities is also the short-term rentals program. We've contracted with a consultant to complete a demand analysis and revenue projections associated with establishing a permit and short-term rentals program. Again, our next steps with that process is community outreach, having some policy study sessions with decision makers, preparing an ordinance and program guidelines, as well as Planning Commission and Council public hearings. And for that project, we do anticipate pursuing third-party implementation options, which are very common for short-term rental programs for many cities. The council also identified a first-time homebuyers program as one of its top priorities. Council approved 0.5% of cannabis retail sales tax allocated to a first-time homebuyers program. The city had such a program over 20 years ago, but at some point it hasn't moved forward with that program in quite some time. So our next steps there are again community outreach and then to develop program guidelines that make sense for today's environment. And the last few programs I wanted to highlight that the council has identified as priorities. We have in place temporary outdoor dining provisions that were put in place during the pandemic, and I think we all agreed resulted in some very positive changes in the community that we wanted to see move forward. So our next steps with establishing a more permanent outdoor dining program are to reach out to the business community about their needs, prepare an ordinance and program guidelines, and then ultimately bring that back to the Planning Commission and Council for adoption. I'm going to turn it over to Dan for one moment to talk briefly about the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and then we'll wrap up here with our challenges, opportunities, and next steps.
Thank you. The Economic Development Strategic Plan, the contract has been finalized, kickoff meeting occurred, and we're in data collection phase. And then shortly thereafter, after a schedule's been decided upon, we'll be moving forward with an outreach strategy.
So the Economic Development Strategic Plan was identified as a council priority quite some time ago. We've made a lot of progress just establishing a framework for that program to move forward in the last year. So we're very excited to kick it off and wrap it up this year. To move to opportunities and challenges, as you can see, we have quite a lot on our plate. From the standpoint of both state mandates, all of the programs that we've committed to as part of the housing element implementation, as well as the various special projects and council priorities that we've discussed this evening. One of our challenges is that such a large proportion of department staff joined the city team relatively recently, within the last few years. As I said, we had 40% of our department positions turn over and remain vacant and then filled them. We're very happy that we were able to attract high-quality staff that are really passionate about working in Costa Mesa and doing a very professional, high-quality job. But most of those positions were entry or journey level. Because we have such a high volume of complex projects with overlapping deadlines, as you've seen, in addition to our very extensive day-to-day operations, it is a challenge to ensure that we have the right staffing and consultant resources to be able to meet timelines and meet those needs. We've identified some needed resources really to move forward with this level of planning effort that we've discussed this evening. One of them is a planning manager to oversee the day-to-day operations of the planning division. It's one of our busiest divisions and provides really the first blush with so many of our customers. And also a senior planner position that's really going to be able to be a project manager for some of these complex projects that we've discussed this evening. We'll also need additional funds for contract project managers and multiple experienced consultant teams, likely working concurrently on the many efforts that we have ongoing. So with that, I want to wrap up our presentation with just reiterating that day-to-day operations are at the highest level that we've seen them in quite some time. Between permits, plan checks, and inspections, we're issuing more of those and going on more inspections than we ever have before. We have multiple high-priority projects with overlapping deadlines, and those are in addition to day-to-day operations. And frankly, as the director of the department, I can say that the day-to-day operations that we have would be enough for most teams of our size to be running at a very high level, very consistently. So I'm really proud of the job that we've been able to do with all of the other special projects, but we are going to need more resources looking forward to all of the things that are on our collective priority list. So tonight, staff is seeking feedback regarding council priorities, and what that will allow us to do is to, the city manager and I, to connect and to talk about how to schedule these projects and how to plan for appropriate staff and consultant resources within the next few years. So with that, I'm happy to finish up our presentation and turn it back over to you, Mayor. Thank you.
Oh, is there more? Or you turn it over to me? Okay, now I think we should have about a 10-minute break. Then let's come back and you can absorb our feedback. Okay? Come back in at literally 10 minutes, 6:22. thank you, everyone. So we're done with our recess. Everybody should take their seats. Most people have taken their seats, so that's good. Are we going to take another stab at Cynthia?
Yes, we are, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so to speak.
You may speak.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I thought your next line was going to be, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown. So first, congratulations to staff for keeping the city's finances on track for budget surplus. We also need to thank the consumers because it was the sales taxes they paid that gave us that surplus. Given there are some extra funds, please consider putting some towards the visioning effort that was promised to Costa Mesa citizens during last year's election, both for the targeted areas of Measure K and the Fairview Developmental Center. As Ms. Lee said, this is to begin in the next few months, but what is staff's concept of that process, and what are the individual council members' concepts? Newport Beach's General Plan Advisory Committee is comprised of about 30 residents and stakeholders. Perhaps Costa Mesa's doesn't need to be quite that many people, but having broad community input and varied experience is needed. Note that Newport committee member meetings are open to the public, recorded, and are available on YouTube to watch. Please consider that option for providing transparency. A 3-person ad hoc committee comprised of only city council members that meets in private is by no means comprehensive or transparent. Our residents deserve better than that. And the residents want to be involved. I, like Wendy Lees, love our city, and I'm concerned about how we're going to plan for the best Costa Mesa there can be, including making our city more bikeable, walkable, having housing affordable for everyone, and adding social equity provisions throughout our general plan document. But engaging the residents in the planning process should be the highest priority project. So the housing element had not been certified when I checked this afternoon. However, I see in the staff report that some work has been done to undertake some of the programs. I would like to see the initial feasibility analysis of the IHO that's been done. Please upload that document to the city's website. Finally, the November version of the housing element was the one that disclosed there would be an offspring of Measure K by the end of 2025. That version was posted on the city's website on about Election Day. I hope the city didn't intentionally withhold that until most of the votes have been cast. You tell me. Again, our residents deserve better than that. At your upcoming retreat, I request that you discuss in depth how to improve transparency and develop policies, including an ethics policy. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for waiting and your persistence, and thank you for staff for working, resourcefully to get our public heard on that. Okay, so let's do this. Any council member that wants to speak, there's no particular order. We're in discussion mode. You can just light up your mic, and I'll call on you. Let's try to be concise if we can, but I don't want to clip anybody's wings. Let's have everybody go through and make whatever comments they want first. The comments could be questions, whatever you want to do, and then all the council members will get a second bite at the apple. If, for example, there's something that one council member said that they want to follow up on, they can do that. And then we'll be, by that time, we'll have quite enough feedback, I think, shared. So the first one that I saw, lighted or lit up? I'm not sure.
I hit my buzzer quick.
Is it lit or lighted or lighted or what? Anyway, it's red. You have it. You have the floor, Jeff.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, first I want to just compliment staff. That was an excellent presentation. I think it's fair to say that, not to the exclusion of other departments, but your department has a very heavy workload. I don't see it abating anytime soon. You all seem to be mildly smiling at the moment. I don't know, except for Jennifer. Oh, now she's chuckling a little. And it's clear to me that, even though some of you have been here for a long time, others are relatively new, you seem to work very well together, and that was evident by the handoffs in your presentation. So thank you for that. I will be as concise as I can. One thing I wanted to ask is on the special projects, which starts on staff report page 13, and maybe it's easiest to start with you, Jennifer. Can you tell me who is the point person for each of these? Not who's involved in it, because I know multiple people are, but who's the primary person responsible? So land management system, I'm going to assume is Dan, but I don't know.
Sure, I'm happy to go through really quickly. So the land management system is Dan Inlows. Our retail cannabis program is Scott Drapkin, as well as Nancy Wynn, supported by Nancy Wynn in our department. Our housing element update at the moment is myself, supported by our new addition to the department, our principal planner, Paivon. Accessory dwelling units is Scott Drapkin, supported by our associate planner, Chris Yeager. Our inclusionary housing ordinance is myself, and we also brought on board a contract planner to assist in that effort. Short-term rentals program, we brought on a contract planner to lead that effort.
Okay.
The first-time homebuyers program, we have not identified a staff member to lead yet. And the outdoor dining ordinance is Scott Drapkin, supported by our planning staff.
Okay. Have people been selected yet or kind of tapped for some of the other projects like Fairview Development Center or senior center housing?
Yes, so let's take, for example, the senior center housing project. Our Scott Drapkin has been lead, supported by Nancy Wynn and also our associate planner, Justin Arios. We also have Fairview Development Center, which is really just kicking off. So up to this point, it's been myself for the initial conversations with the state regarding the agreement and securing the grant funding, but will be transferred to our principal planner, Paivon.
Oh, okay.
Community visioning and zoning updates, as you might imagine, that is a very staff-intensive project. We envision needing multiple contract project managers, as well as multiple consultant teams working concurrently. We have, as you know, many specific plans and urban plans in the city that need updating along with our corridor plans as well. So we really envision a very coordinated effort involving multiple staff members and multiple leads.
Okay, so on that specific topic, and I was honestly a little surprised to read this, and maybe I'm misreading it, but is this intended to be a general plan update?
Yes, it will be a general plan update.
Okay, so typically a general plan update is something that council would give direction on pursuing. It would be a significant investment of time and resources. I mean, we're talking a couple $1 million easily. And as you noted, it would probably require a lot of staff time. I mean, these are usually all hands efforts. So I'm a little apprehensive about saying, yes, this should rise to the top of the list when we have a significant amount of work already planned. That's not to say I don't think we should be doing community visioning and zoning updates. I think it should be part of other specific projects that we're going to pursue, and I'll get to that in 1 second. On the senior center housing project, maybe this is for you, Scott. So I saw the slide. If you wouldn't mind bringing that back up again. Do you have the slide for that one?
If you'll just give me 1 moment. Yes, I do.
So can I just say something just procedurally? Just in general, if it could apply to all items from now on, if we do an extensive PowerPoint like this, if it would be great if the council either had it in like a notebook, or if there's a way, some council members are from the new century and they use pads and things of that nature, and if they could have access to it, because it's hard to it's hard to interact when you're just seeing it and reading it the first time and then to make notes and come back to it. So that's not well, just with this. I mean, it's just from now on, when we have an extensive PowerPoint presentation.
So really my question on this, Scott, is just simply what's the time frame for this to occur to get back to council for consideration?
So it really depends on the applicant and the applicant getting their plans straight. They have been working with staff the last couple of weeks. They've kind of returned to this project. There was a delay with a change in management of that project between the project managers for Jamboree Housing. But from a perspective of getting it back to a screening, I would say once we have the plans complete, and we're getting there, and even before we get some of those bullet points taken care of 100%, we can bring this to screening within at least 2 months.
Okay.
So not a very long time.
Okay, so it's partly the applicant and it's some city processing.
It is. It's more than just the applicant, but some of the requirements require the applicant to be involved with some of the city necessary items to really give the city council a clear description of what the changes are since the first review of this project were and the decisions that the council made with regards to sort of making the commitment of using the senior center as a housing project.
Right. Okay, so let me just go through kind of quickly what I think should be some priorities for the department and the city moving forward. And let me at least recognize that it's always a fluid situation. We can expect more state legislation to come through that we're going to have to adapt to, maybe modify ordinances. So I understand the workload is going to, shift on occasion. But as from my vantage point, number one priority would be doing our rezoning under our housing element and including some targeted zoning code amendments. So, for example, parking has been a constant issue. Comes up pretty much with every project and every consideration. I'd like us to try and address that once and for all in our code so we can get it right and it doesn't become this constant deviation. Number two would be our inclusionary housing ordinance. I'd like to see that process expedited. I'd like to see us do it right. And I think what you outlined is going to be necessary, but I want to make sure that that stays on the top of our list. And again, that's a program under our housing element. The third would be Fairview Development Center. We've got money from the state. We've got a relatively short period of time to do this. It's a very important strategic part of our community. And to my mind would actually be the good place to start a visioning effort. And in fact, I think we could probably combine it, and I'd like to hear council's ideas on this too, probably combine that with do corridor planning for Harbor Boulevard as well. There may be some efficiencies there, and it is physically linked together. Fourth would be Jamboree Housing, senior housing that we were talking about. And then last on my immediate list is the LMS program, which I know it's already moving forward, but I think, Dan, you said a game changer. I'm hoping that's going to be the case, but I think we need that infrastructure in place, and hopefully that will make things a little bit easier for us as far as processing is concerned. Those are the top, I'd say, priority projects. And I think given the fact that we need a planning manager and a senior planner will be vital to implementing these. I don't know what the time frame was trying to get those positions filled, but I'm sure yesterday was probably the answer. But realistically, what is it going to take to get those positions filled with the staff that we would expect?
I'll respond to that since I'm kind of collecting the data from the departments on what we're going to bring to you and the timing. And so in March, we'll do the mid-year update. Carol Molina will bring that report, and in that report, we will be sharing with you our recommendations for mid-year staffing changes, even before we adopt the budget in June. The reason we'd like to do that is twofold. One is to get a head start on some of these critical positions. If we wait until budget adoption in June, the fiscal year doesn't become effective till July 1 legally. We really can't start that work until after July 1, and that just delays everything. And so we're going to come with just a targeted number of positions. I think we're at about 6 or 7 positions that we'll be requesting mid-year that we think we can afford given the city's financial condition more than halfway through the year at this point. At least get the head start on that. They probably won't start until July, but we can get that planning all done beforehand, get those recruitments going. And it's our anticipation to bring these two hopefully next month. I think the planning manager is a new position for the city, which is unusual. And so it's a new classification that needs to come to you anyway, but we'll in there line out the funding strategy and all that. And we think we have sufficient revenue to get that all done with a few of the other positions like the parks adjustments that we talked about at the last study session. So that should be to you next month.
Okay. I mean, I want us to be very realistic about what can be accomplished in this upcoming year and what we already have planned. So I think we need to be very careful and make some priority decisions. And in as much as I would love for us to update our general plan comprehensively, especially since the last effort was, in my mind, fairly deficient, especially with regard to listening to the community. I think that's a huge lift for us at the moment. I don't know that we could even contemplate doing something like that. We have significant work that needs to be done. We have regulatory compliance, our housing element in particular. I want to make sure we're doing those things first and pursuing some of the other projects as we can. And obviously, these aren't going to be sequential. We're just going to have a lot of overlap here. But I don't envy the workload, but I want you to know that we're supportive up here. We definitely want to make sure that we do things right so we don't have to do them again. And those are my initial comments, John.
Right.
Can I ask Councilmember Harlan just a clarifying question?
Of course.
And this may just be a matter of understanding sort of all of the steps involved in visioning and planning and zoning general plan updates. I just want to make sure I understand what you're distinguishing between the priority you listed around sort of the visioning, I think related to FDC and Measure K zones. Where do you draw the line between like what you think we should be doing versus the general plan update?
Well, I would start by saying we should have visioning and community engagement in every planning process that we do. That's just a standard piece. It's just what projects do we take on now? I mean, typically you would be doing visioning citywide and our corridors in particular in a whole general plan update. I don't know that we can take on that right now. So, for example, Fairview Development Center seems to be something that's already funded. We'd be doing our community engagement and visioning for that. I think adding Harbor Boulevard corridor planning and doing visioning for that makes sense if we can, in fact, do that under the grant provisions.
So how do we implement a vision? You create the vision, and then we have to change some kind of code, right, to be able to implement that. What is that, if not a general plan update?
Well, it would be general plan amendment. So you can amend the general plan incrementally.
Okay, I think that's where my confusion. So you're not saying don't touch the general plan.
No.
You're saying don't do an overhaul of the general plan, do incremental updates.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to be clear on that. Appreciate that.
Okay. Andrea.
Okay, I'm going to kind of go in order here, but I apologize in advance if I'm jumping around. What is the status of the Motel 6 project?
So I believe we have Nate in the audience, so I'd like him to come up and talk a little about the status. But from staff's perspective, we were instrumental in the acquiring the funding and coordinating with the state. We also issued building permits recently for Phase 1 in an expedited timeline. So from our perspective, Phase 1 is under construction. There's a lot of details related to the funding in Phase 2, but the project is moving forward.
Okay. Go ahead, Nate.
Thank you. There was, I guess, slight delays. There were 4 permanent residents that needed to be relocated. 3 of them were relocated pretty quickly. There was a 4th that held out until the absolute last day that she had to leave. Once that resident was permanently relocated, they were able to go full bore into construction on the entire site. Up until that point, they were only able to touch about half the property, and they had to leave the other half alone. They weren't able to put up a security fence, so there were some security issues with some of the equipment that they wanted to bring on site. All that to say, that final holdout has been relocated. They're able to go, again, full bore on construction. They're still looking at September, October for Phase 1 completion, which, just to remind you, is 30 veterans, 10 MHSA eligible, so 40 total permanent supportive housing units in Phase 1. It's, again, on track, ready to go. We toured it with CPU just to ensure that there were no loitering issues and things of that nature. The site's completely clear and on track for, again, September, October. They will be applying for tax credits in either March or June for a July or October award. If they don't make the award this cycle, then they're going to try again next year. The hope is that they would be awarded this year, and then so Phase 2 could start immediately after Phase 1 was completed. And just to remind you on that, Phase 2 is 47 units of permanent housing for very low-income seniors, all which will have to be from Costa Mesa. So that's very exciting.
Okay, I just recently got a couple of neighbor inquiries about what the status of the project was. I'm wondering, I was already going to ask to do some sort of like a council member coffee. I'm wondering if we can maybe do it on that side of my district so we can just make it open for anybody who's got questions about the status of that project. I think that would be helpful. And while you're up here, actually, this might be a question for you, or it might be a question for Fidel. So, as you were talking about some of the hoarding incidents, I know that we've also utilized Trellis and the Labors of Love team to address some of those specifically. I understand that some of them have to go a judicial route, but I'm wondering to the extent that we can sort of handle things within Costa Mesa, utilize the volunteer force that we have. How do we make that part of our process, or is that always going to be a bolt-on because you still have to follow the legal process that you're required to by law?
So the legal process is generally for us like the last part, almost like the last ditch effort, because we try to bring forth all the resources we have, which includes bringing church groups and having them to talk with the resident who's having the concern. Because a lot of times these things are just corrected by conversations with someone they trust. And then once that's done, we're no longer involved. So it is part of our process. It's generally instruction that every code officer has is go that route first prior to tackling this through the judicial process.
Okay. So, I mean, in practice, is that the sort of thing we would need to formalize through a contract, right, that says that we use some of these community outreach groups when we have these things happen? Or do we leave it informal such that it's up to like the code enforcement officer or you to contact the appropriate volunteer organizations to help with situations like hoarding?
Well, the resources that we have, we always present it to the individual first. We talk to them and explain what's available, and we start there. And if in fact we're able to create a good communication with those individuals, then we move them in that direction. Sometimes it's just a flat out no, and unfortunately at that point we have to move to our second process. But staff has always been trained to do that first. We don't want to go through the judicial process. We want to help the individual. Part of that is evaluating what's going on. With the slide that I presented earlier, that individual, we did the exact same thing. We try to resolve it through the resources we had. Unfortunately, as staff communicated with her, we started realizing there was something else there. And that led to having to bring outside agencies to do an evaluation. But that assessment by those outside agencies determined that, in fact, she was not able to care for herself. So then that then pushed us into the judicial request.
Okay. If at all
This is,
possible. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, hi, this is Kim Barlow
It's working.
on Zoom. Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Fidel said. We really try hard to keep the legal team out of those issues as much as possible, especially in the type of situation where there's a potential mental illness. Um, Really, every resource is typically exhausted before it ends up taking it to a receiver. Uh, there are some cases where it's not a mental illness issue, it's just a really recalcitrant resident who refuses to clean up their property. Then we might be more quickly um, taking it to the court for a receivership. But whenever it's a hoarding situation or a mental illness, we try to be very sensitive to that.
Okay, thank you. Fidel, you made a comment about an increase in illegal cannabis after we legalized. I was a little bit surprised by that. I think one of the promises of legalizing cannabis is a decrease in the illegal market.
Well, with any new approval of anything, I mean, let's say, I'll give you another example. You know, we moved in the direction of allowing ADUs in the city. Well, even though there's a permitting process for that, we still find that people are doing them illegally without the, going through the approval process. The cannabis industry is no different, but as soon as we determine that we find one, we go after it. And the hope is that the message is put out that don't try to come into the city to do anything illegally. So, and we have a really good team with the police department. We're on top of it pretty much on a weekly basis. We have meetings all the time. So although I see an increase now, it's not a huge increase. It just means that we are seeing activity.
Okay, thank you. All right, so continuing on cannabis, I think Mr. Fitzpatrick mentioned, one of the proposals that I've heard from the city manager is the idea of being a little bit more realistic with the amount of staff time that we can devote on a monthly basis to processing permitting applications for the cannabis industry. And my understanding is that it's because it's essentially consumed our entire department to date. So I was wondering if you could just over the last year ballpark what percentage of the planning division's time do you think we have spent on cannabis?
Well, I'd say I have a tough time ballparking in terms of man hours, but I can tell you that we have, of the 11 planners in our planning division, we have 5 devoted to the launch and rollout of the cannabis program in various capacities. So it's not 5 full-time all the time staff members, but certainly a large proportion. Some of them are full-time, and a large proportion of the time of the others have been allocated to cannabis applications.
Okay. And then city manager, I understand that you are going to bring forward agenda as an item to potentially reconsider how we are processing those applications.
Yes, so in line with all of the other high priority projects that we have and some of the discussions that we've had on the floor regarding prioritizing staff workloads, I'm going to be bringing next month a proposal and we've just had a conversation with the industry yesterday about this recommendation is to do the 1 per month processing. And then also offer potentially reimbursements, but this would be based on your approval, but this is what we'll be bringing forward, is an opportunity for applicants to have a sense of where they are in the queue. We'll be getting to all of the applicants by the end of this week, information regarding where they are in the placement of the line in terms of processing. And then that will enable them to see if they can, what business decision they need to make about their application. We've heard that some of the applicants are interested in, potentially pulling away or making other business decisions, but they just need that information in terms of when they would be in the queue. So we'll be giving that by the end of the week. And then we would offer to you, council, that we refund anybody who's gone through the cannabis business permit process is at the CUP potential level. We've probably gathered about 40 grand in fees, and that we reimburse that just as a good faith reimbursement for the fact that we're going to be changing the pace of processing here because of all of the state mandates we need to implement and all of the other assignments that we have as well. And so we'll be bringing that next month. Again, we had the conversation with some folks in the industry yesterday. We'll be posting the list also of each applicant and where they are, all 63, 64 or so. Obviously, some have already gone to Planning Commission, but for those that haven't, we'll have that, what stage they're in, and when we anticipate that they would be going to Planning Commission. And so given the large number of applications, we anticipate like that tail end of the list will probably be 2025 is what we're guessing. And so we hope to get that out. The industry's been asking for a little bit more certainty here. And so I think that this will address all the questions that we've been getting.
Okay, thank you. In concept, before saying it, I agree with that proposal. Looking forward to seeing it before us at council. On the inclusionary housing ordinance, you've got a comment in here about bringing it to the ad hoc committee. I think having not been part of the cannabis ad hoc and then sort of getting a staff report dropped on me that half the council had been working on for 6 months to a year, and then being on the other side of that and being on the housing ad hoc and being the one doing the dropping on the rest of council, I'd like to suggest that we don't do these things through an ad hoc. It's too confusing to figure out. If you're not involved in all the planning, you're getting one meeting to digest what people have been working on for a year or vice versa. And so to the extent, city attorney, I don't think we need to dissolve the housing ad hoc necessarily, but to the extent we don't use that as a vehicle, I would prefer that we just brought things directly to council. I don't know if any of my colleagues agree with that, but I'm sure some of them do. On the short-term rentals, city attorney, does that, if we were to implement a transient occupancy tax on short-term rentals, would that need to go before the voters or just a supermajority of council?
No, that is a transient occupancy, and so it would not need to be brought before the voters. It would be essentially a new hotel or motel type use that would be subject to that tax.
Got it, because we wouldn't be changing the value of the tax, we would just be changing who was subject to it. Understood.
Correct.
Okay.
Expand to new. It's as if a new motel or a hotel located in the city.
Okay, and that is already part of the analysis, correct? That the consultant would be doing?
I believe so, yeah.
Yes, that's part of the analysis, and the codified definitions associated with transient occupancy tax are broad enough that we think it actually already covers short-term rentals. So what we intend to bring forward is some policy recommendations around short-term rentals and how the program would be set up, and ultimately some revenue projections.
I might have just stayed in an Airbnb this weekend and the tax was 14.5%. So yes, absolutely it qualifies as TOT. Okay, so I think I'm done here, with the exception of sort of listing my priorities as Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Harlan did just now. I completely agree with the idea of doing. I know. For those listening at home, there's a cell phone ringing. So. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to see us bring some element of the community visioning forward to the extent that we can combine or prioritize some of the corridors that we're working on that would seem to make the most sense given the timelines are going to be similar for Fairview Developmental Center and starting our Measure K process. I don't know that we can focus on all of the corridors at once. That seems a little overwhelming and frankly confusing to the residents that we're asking for their input on diverse parts of the city at the same time. And so I'd like to see us focus that effort and do one or two things well. If we don't get to the planning of Bristol for 3 years, I'm fine with that. But Harbor and Newport especially, I think need to be priorities, and also provide really the greatest opportunity for public input in a meaningful way. And so to the extent we can have even, I don't know if you're planning on bifurcating sort of the visioning and planning from, the brass tacks of a specific plan, but it would seem that there would be an opportunity for input on both Fairview Developmental Center, Harbor, and Newport as kind of one contiguous opportunity for public input. I'm sure I'm going to get yelled at from somebody in the public for not describing visioning correctly, but that needs to come first. And then I agree, let's do zoning on Harbor and Newport. Let's tackle Fairview Developmental Center. Let's get an inclusionary housing ordinance done as quickly as possible. I'd love to focus on the outdoor dining ordinance, but just being realistic, I think that doesn't come nearly as top of mind for me. Agree with the idea of adding a senior planner and a planning manager. I think the order of people that I email at the city is Jennifer Lee, followed by the city manager, followed by Raja. So to the extent we can take things off of your plate and not require you to be in the weeds on every project, Jennifer, I think that would be a good thing. But I do want to just say, this department has worked their butts off. I know you've had so much change, so much turnover, so many things to deal with over the last year, and you've gotten it done. I think you're probably the department that doesn't get all of the love, right? It's easy to blame planning for things not going perfectly. It's easy to blame building permits. It's easy to complain about how long you had to wait to get an email back about your application. But you guys do a lot of the really hard work, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it. How bad I feel for bugging you regularly, but absolutely, let's get you the resources you need. And let's stop spending half of our time on cannabis, please. Thank you.
Okay, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a few questions in a few areas I'd like to go over. Let me just knock off the short-term rental thing. So it was mentioned that we're going to do community outreach for short-term rentals. Do we have a date on that? When are we going? What approximately? When we'll do that?
We don't have a specific timeline. One of the discussions that we wanted to have this evening is about priorities. We did bring on a consultant to do the initial analysis so that we could be ready with policy recommendations and revenue projections, but we don't have a specific timeline for outreach quite yet.
Okay. Cannabis tax. I know that we had a 0.5% tax for a first-time buyers program. Obviously, that's going to be 0.5% based on the taxes that come in just to the city. Can someone tell me how much tax we've generated so far from the first store?
I don't have those numbers this evening.
Okay.
I can tell you the first month of the first store was $15,000.
Yeah, I've asked for a report with that information, not just the new retail, but also the delivery applicants that have been processed back since April. And so we'll be looking at that. We'll also be gearing up for audits just to make sure that, we're getting the funds timely. And so staff's working on the latest and greatest information on Measure X and then the Measure Q and delivery. But in terms of the 0.5% for this, it'd be minimal because there's still so many more. We only have the one cannabis retail dispensary open that's actually remitting.
I am interested in hearing what those numbers are as early as possible. We hear a lot of talk about that they aren't going to provide a substantial income. They really aren't that great for cities after all. And I would like to be able to see if we can substantiate claims like that. In addition, I also heard that we have an increase in illegal shops. And I was just wondering, do we have a number on that? How many illegal shops?
So I can start with a response. I'm not sure that it's an increase in illegal shops. I think the better way to say it is that with the city pursuing a legal route to allow for retail cannabis uses, we reallocated resources both from PD and code enforcement to more aggressively pursue locations that had been reported to us. So at that time, we had approximately 30 unpermitted cannabis retail stores. We systematically went through that list with our PD partners and community improvement staff, and ultimately ensured that those illegal operators closed down prior to the city launching its illegal cannabis pathway.
So there's been a reduction. There was 30 and there's something substantially less than 30 now.
So I guess the question I would ask is if we had 30, that means we had 0. So if you're telling me that one cannabis shop opened, you're going to call that an increase? I want a number, because here's why. When I hear the word increase, that tells our constituents, oh, we have an increase in pot shops that are illegal, and maybe that's not the case. So it's a matter of interpretation. I think that's important that we clarify.
No, I would say that's not the case. I think what the description was a description of our focus on ensuring that any illegal operators were closed and ensuring that our legal folks who were interested in a legal pathway for cannabis retail had one. That's it.
So then can we say that really there isn't an increase? It's been decreased to almost nothing, and 1 or 2 might pop up here and there and we close them down?
Yeah, I would say that.
I like that description much better than leaving it at increase. Have we had any crime or any issues? Maybe this is a question for the chief, I don't know. In the one store that we have open now, have there been any traffic incidents, pedestrian incidents? Do we have any related crime? Do we have people spending the night out there that maybe anyone could speak to?
Councilmember Gameros, I did a little research on the one that we have open. It opened sometime in November, and there has been 1 call for service, and it was a false alarm activation, which is pretty consistent with new businesses opening up, new employees learning how to operate their system. There's been no increase in crime and no concerns of activity around that location.
Okay, I'll note that as trouble-free. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to move on to our homeless shelter. Nate? First of all, I want to say you're doing an excellent job. After the tour, it was an enlightening experience. I've had a couple of tours there, and I know that we have a need for more beds. And one of the things that was brought up was putting bunk beds in to try and cover that. So is the shelter full? That's one question I'd like to ask.
Yes, sir. Generally, the shelter is at max capacity almost every day. We have Newport, right as of today, has 2 male beds, but they generally have 0, and we're almost always full every single day. So.
Okay, and where are we at with getting? I think was bunk beds one of the solutions or the solution that we're going to consider?
The bunk bed solution was being discussed. I'm not exactly sure how far that's gone. I would actually defer that to the city manager for her comments on that.
Yeah, when we did the development and the discussion around the capacity at the homeless shelter, council's direction was to try to spec it so that we could get at least 100 beds. And so the beds that we purchased are bunkable intentionally. And so that is the plan at this time. If we were to expand, either for ourselves or for Newport, if we were to do a combination, it would be to provide additional beds via the bunking. And we think we have the capacity. There's high ceilings. I think it would still preserve the same quality of experience and make it so we could maximize that footprint as much as possible while helping as many people as possible.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Lauren has the floor.
You can go ahead. I'll
I just want to clarify. I mean, staff is going to bring that back to council before we make any decisions about expanding the homeless
Oh,
shelter.
yeah,
correct?
absolutely, because there's a significant cost differential. And so I know I've talked to you all about it in terms of the request from the city of Newport Beach. We can also take that opportunity to revisit it for ourselves, but we'll come with a specific request. We'll give you a couple of options in terms of numbers of beds and then also the costs. And so we'll be putting that together right now. I'm in negotiations with Mercy House. And so on the additional cost that would be incurred, it would also require a contract amendment if we were to go down that path. I know that about a couple of weeks ago, we had a waiting list of about 30. I'm not sure if the waiting list has grown or not, but this could accommodate a majority of that. And we would have the Federal American Rescue Plan funds to be able to use for that purpose as well. And so we'll come back with some different options for you to consider the funding. The only thing with the American Rescue Plan funds is that they'll expire, or we'll have to spend them by a certain time, and then we would have to determine if we have the general fund revenue to continue to provide that level of service. But until then, we can help a lot of people with the Federal American Rescue Plan funds if we were to do this. And so we'll bring something for your full consideration and deliberation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilwoman. So speaking of funds, I know that it's going to take a lot of money to make this stuff happen. Are we working on any type of galas or events to try and raise money to promote things that we need? And if we aren't, can we do that? Or are we already doing that? Can you speak to that? Like, what are we doing to generate income for this? Is there a nonprofit that can help us with that? I know we're paying out nonprofits to help run it, but what about engaging?
I'll speak to that, Nate. And so at this time, we haven't done anything like that. The amount of money that we've been spending is coming mostly from some federal sources, but then also a general fund subsidy. But again, when we bring this next month, I think for the time being, the Federal American Rescue Plan funds that we have will be more than sufficient to cover. I think the fundraising efforts probably will need to do that in about probably 24 months or 2 years from now. But I think the money that we have now from the feds will be enough to bridge it.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I have just one last item. When we toured the facility the first time, the homeless shelter on Airway, there's this great, big, beautiful industrial kitchen, and it seemed to me that we weren't utilizing it other than to contract another company out to just kind of land food there. So I'm just wondering, is there a plan in place where we start cooking food out of this kitchen eventually, and why aren't we doing it now? So if someone could answer.
Yes, sir. We, council approved an award to Bracken's Kitchen, $327,000 annually to produce 3 meals a day for up to 70 shelter guests, 365 days a year. These are 5-star, some even Michelin-rated chefs that are cooking these meals, so very, very high quality. All the ingredients are brought in fresh and cooked right there in the shelter.
Okay.
We get nothing but positive feedback from the guests about the meals. In addition, Bracken's has a volunteer program, so they engage the community. They offer community service hours. We have up to 4 students from Vanguard University over there getting portions of their tuition worked off by volunteering at the kitchen. They also have a community food truck that they can bring out to city events where they repurpose food and provide free meals to the community that we're going to be utilizing as well. So Bracken's is an amazing partner for the city.
Okay, thank you. I have a second last question. I apologize. What are we doing for the homeless after we engage them, after we house them in our temporary housing facility when their time is up? I know there's a limited time that they can spend there. Do we ask them to walk around the block and wait in line number 31, or how does that work?
So while the shelter is technically a 180-day shelter, there's no real time limit. We're not kicking people out if they can't find housing. There's many barriers to someone finding housing, anywhere from credit history to identification. So our goal is to work with every individual to overcome those barriers, to find different housing options for them, and we don't stop working until we find that for each and every person. people self-exit, people exit because of behavioral reasons, but they never are exited because they aren't able to find housing, especially in this market with low vacancy and, lack of resources. But we work tirelessly until we find housing for everybody.
I have a follow-up. So with that, when we do intake, what do we do with those people that are on drugs? Say they're on heroin, fentanyl, whatever, go down the list, and they come in and they're addicted. I know there's a very small window. What are we doing to get them into a treatment? They have to go to a treatment facility before they come in, right? Is that correct?
So the shelter is low barrier in that they don't have to be sober to get into the shelter. It would, not always, but it could impede their ability to progress at the shelter, to do what they need to do if they are addicted. But it's not a barrier to them getting into the shelter. We accept everyone. But there are no specific detox resources at the shelter. So in order to accomplish that, we'd have to send people to third-party facilities to be able to accomplish that. There are people that come in and because of their addictions, maybe quickly exit and come back and exit and come back and exit, and we urge them to get treatment before they try to come back again. Again, we won't refuse them, but that is one of the gaps that we're looking to fill at the city is more intentional detox, whether it be outpatient residential detox or working with some of our local providers like College Hospital, who has some of that. Hoag Hospital has some of that. But again, it is one of the gaps that we're trying to fill.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I think I'm done.
Nate, so are you saying that even like a referral system, we don't even have that, where somebody comes in and they have an addiction issue, and we're not even able to place them with the referral?
So our outreach team is amazing. They have connections with all the different detox facilities in Orange County and outside of Orange County. So the referral system is there. It's the availability of beds. So if all you're doing is sending people to facilities, there's no vacancy. So a lot of times in that moment of clarity that somebody has where they want to get clean, it passes before we're able to find them a place to go. So the gap that I'm speaking of is more of an immediate availability of this resource for people that in that moment want nothing more than to get clean, but in 12 hours, they're not going to want that anymore. So the gap that I would like to see filled is to have that immediate resource for our residents that want nothing more than to get clean.
And is there a financial impediment? I know you said the availability, but do we have financial resources that can help someone who's interested in beating their addiction and getting off the streets?
It's more a partnership with the county. The county healthcare agency is kind of the lead on those types of resources. I've been speaking to the director over there just about how we could partner on something like that. So it's in the works, but it's still a little ways off.
That's not the agency that got wrapped up in that investigation, is it?
Just county, like public health, basically.
Be Well or something?
No, so Be Well is partially funded by the county, but that's a private public partnership.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Were you?
I'm good. No, thank you. Thank you for that.
Before we go to the west side, Dawn, do you have any questions or comments? Okay. Are we going to the west side?
About time.
Manny.
West side's the best time. Thank you, Mayor Stephen. Thank you, staff, for the good, detailed presentation. Before I begin my questions and comments, I want to thank Lauren. I'm following kind of informal here, Mayor, as you said, first names, for asking those good questions about cannabis. I know a lot of times new things bring fear, a lot of opportunities to be scared of something new, but thankfully we've seen with this first legal cannabis retail shop, that there hasn't been much increase in criminal activity. And that's a positive thing, because a lot of these sites that we're seeing cannabis come into are sites that have for a long time not been invested in. I know a lot of them in South Florida Boulevard. I mean, my entire life, that boulevard had really been in need of investment. So I'm just happy to hear you ask those tough questions, and thank you to staff for answering it, including the police chief. So I really want to begin, though, with something the mayor said the first meeting of January, which is if there was one thing he can do as mayor, and he'd be happy to do it, and we'd be proud to have this be his legacy, was having a culture of customer service. I fully agree with the mayor on that regard. I think so oftentimes the city staff are the first gauge someone has to our city, and it's so important that we're expeditious and helpful in that regard. So I just want to have asked the questions to the planning department, and kind of see how we measure success in the planning and entitlement process. So how do we measure success? Do we measure in terms of completed applications, in terms of volume accomplished? How are we internally measuring success in your department?
I think there are a number of performance indicators that we look at. One of them is responsiveness in terms of how quickly we are able to process applications. But more than that, it's also the quality of the projects and the quality of the professional recommendations that we're able to provide to the Planning Commission and the Council. We have performance indicators related to wait times at our public counter, responsiveness when we receive an email inquiry or a phone inquiry, and those are in addition to project timelines that we also focus on in terms of responsiveness. I think one of the challenges that we have had in the past, just in terms of tracking and managing timelines and responsiveness, has really been our technology. I've said before to this body that a lot of times when I'm asked for data or information along these lines, it really is something that we're compiling by hand. We do a lot of things with Excel spreadsheets that other cities do with technology and systems. So I truly believe that when we are able to launch our land management system this summer, that it will be a game changer for customer service, because customers will be able to track their projects and their timelines and communicate with individual staff members seamlessly through our web portal. So we're really excited about the launch of that technology. We think it will be a game changer for customer service.
Thank you, Jennifer, for answering that issue with technology. You cut off like half my questions. That's perfect. I think that's great. I mean, so just for my knowledge, like currently, are we seeing the bottleneck really being just the lack of I don't want to say efficient, but like the lack of a convenient way to relay information across departments that you feel like the new land system will kind of mitigate?
Yes, that's definitely a challenge. Obviously, when you have a land development project, it's not just the planning division or the building division that are responsible for interacting with that applicant. It's not just our economic development team that's interacting with that applicant at the beginning. We also have partnerships with Public Works, the fire department, our police department. All departments are really come to bear in reviewing land development proposals and being part of that process. So coordination and communication between departments is always a very big issue and a very big challenge, and something that the land management system will also help with because of the fact that it's integrating all departments into one system.
That's perfect. And again, it kind of just brings back full circle to about 4 years ago when we really tried to invest in the IT department of Costa Mesa. I've always said this, and I will always be saying this, that the IT is the backbone of our city. And we're truly seeing this now in kind of the issues we have in the department. Or not issues, the challenges, sorry. Trying to be positive. This is good stuff. And then next question I had is, do we have a process for like expediting or streamlining permits currently in the city?
We do. Specifically, we have a process. It's really a process that applies for building permits. Planning land development review is very different. So primarily when we talk about expedited permitting, we're talking about the building division. We brought to council, maybe it was a year ago now, several contracts for outside contract professionals to be able to offer expedited plan check to our customers. We also have been able to, at one point we had only one in-house plan check engineer in the building department altogether. So we sent out the vast majority of the plan checks and permits that we received through building were sent out to outside consultants. Now we've been able to fill those positions, so we're keeping much more of that expertise and that customer service in-house so that we're not having to send customers to an outside person to speak to. They get a person who works for the city, with the city, who's available at our public counter to speak to anytime they have questions.
That's awesome. And then that's probably a good segue to my next kind of question. So very happy to see that we've kind of have hired those positions we need to hire. It's very good to see that turnover rate's kind of gone. But I'm guessing we have, relatively speaking, a new team, right? And I know I'm saying this publicly because I know sometimes, you know, it takes time for things to gel and groove, and all of us has been new at some point. So I'm just happy to see that we're really trying to fix or address the issues we have in the department and helping you have the tools that you need. I really just have two more points on this department before I move on to others. The next one I have, and this is kind of a recent concern for me. So I know a lot of things that come to you guys have to go to planning commission at some point. I look at the prior planning commission agendas, and it seems like we average between 2 to 3 a meeting, and you guys confirmed it today with 2.5. Do we have, well, I should ask, like, can we up that amount for our planning commissioners to have more public hearings per planning commission meeting? Or is there a reason why we're kind of taking it a little slower right now?
So we really look at planning commission agendas and agenda setting based on, one, the applications that are ready and to move forward to a planning commission hearing, two, how many items we have on the agenda, and have we given the planning commission enough room to really be able to review and understand all the materials that we're giving them. We never want to overload the planning commission, but certainly we don't want to undertax them either. I think what we're doing is hitting the sweet spot of right where we want to be in terms of the amount, the number of projects that they're seeing on average, but it doesn't have much to do with the planning commission's capacity. It has more to do with the applications that are ready to move forward to hearing.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that. I'll just say for the record, I would want to see us have more items. I understand that it seems to be what's ready, but I would just like to see us having more public hearings on planning commission, because so many times that's the only thing that people see in terms of what they want to get approved. So I think it's important for that. Last thing on this department, yes, happy to give you 3 more employees. Honestly, anything you guys need on our end to make things more efficient and easier for you guys, happy to do so. I do like the fact that we're using consultants when appropriate. I think at the end of the day, to follow the mayor's point from that first meeting that really stuck to me is we want to be a good customer service. We want to be good at that department, because at the end of the day, I always view our job here on council as very simple. It's make sure that we have enough funding for the police, for fire, that the roads are paved, that the community is safe. But more importantly, to do all those things, we need to have revenue streams, and this is the way to get revenue. So overall, happy you guys are doing, happy to have these conversations and to have the answers. Second, I want to begin with Dan and his department. On that same note, I know Dan does amazing work, and I really appreciate all you do, but anything this man needs, let's help him out, because the development is what brings us tax dollars to improve parks, to improve bike paths. And I'm really hesitant to always raise taxes on residents. I think it's our job to find business opportunities. So again, anything we do to help out Dan and his department, happy to do so. On community improvement, I have nothing but praise. I mean, the amount of times I've gotten a quick turnaround on graffiti, the amount of joy I see from residents when we do those trash pickups is immense. It really does bring dignity to our community, and people feel appreciated when those days happen. So I just want to say, again, good job on that. Now for my priorities, Pro Tem Harlan, with his comments, kind of made me reconsider my priorities a little bit, but I do think we should be moving with some form of Measure X implementation. I understand his concern about doing a big general plan update. It's pretty comprehensive, but I just feel like within the Measure K implementation, there's 3 places I really want to see us start first. I think 1, Harbor Boulevard in conjunction with FDC, probably the most natural and best place to start. this is really this is like really one of the last two big parcels in Costa Mesa that can be developed. And I think there's a lot of things we can do right in that parcel to really demonstrate how high density housing could be done in a way that feels organic, it feels walkable, it feels bikeable. So I think FTC alongside Harbor Boulevard should be our first priority for Measure K implementation. Second, I think New Boulevard has been long overdue for overhaul. I don't even know if we really have a functioning corridor, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of missed potential there. And again, that'll be developing an area that really is in need of development and investment. And that's really what I see Measure K is doing. And honestly, Measure Q, it's investing in these areas that have been kind of left behind for so long. And finally, Placentia Boulevard. This one's a little more dear to my heart because it does run through my district, but this is kind of the main artery in West Side Costa Mesa. There's a lot of potential on that boulevard. I've always viewed it as the perfect place to do high density housing, especially with the bike path coming through, especially because that goes and leads to a high school, it leads to an elementary school and Wilson School, and it leads to a really big green open space. And for me, as I look at investing in my district and really giving Shalimar the opportunity it needs to thrive, like having a corridor that's beautiful and that has pathways to like green space and to high schools, I think would be a good sign of what Measure K was trying to do. That's number one on the priorities list. Number two is definitely the inclusionary housing ordinance. Time and time again, when we meet with developers, they'll say the same exact thing. They say if you really care about inclusionary housing ordinance or about inclusionary housing in your projects, put an ordinance on paper. Show me your values. Show me you care enough as City of Costa Mesa to not ask me to die in the 12th hour. Do it early on. So I think that's an important show to people coming to Costa Mesa that we do prioritize all income brackets, but more importantly, it gives us an easier chance to advocate for those in our community that need more affordable housing in a more efficient way. Three, the senior housing project across the street from the towers, I think it's important. I would wish it wasn't just for seniors, but I appreciate that we're finding locations for them. They do need some help, and I think we've seen enough with the tower that you don't require a lot of parking spots to do things for seniors. And in fact, that little corridor is really walkable. The improvements we're making with the bike paths are going to make it more pedestrian friendly. I think we should be doubling down on that and making sure that our seniors have a place in Costa Mesa as well. Number four, I might change this because it's a few months away with the LMS system. Just anything we can do to really promote customer service. I mean, well needed and necessary. And finally, the outdoor dining ordinance. It's not high in the priority because I think housing is really more important than anything else. I think people really can't focus on anything else unless they have a safe home over their heads. So obviously housing supersedes the outdoor dining, but I still think it's a unique thing that we learned in the pandemic that actually works. And I know for me and my community in West Costa Mesa, it was a sad day to see social kind of remove their outdoor dining because that was such a cool space and made it more attractive for people. And again, that ties back into the idea of let's bring tax dollars to sales revenue. Let's find ways to increase revenue because that only increase our funding for police, only increase our funding for parks, our funding for public safety, our funding for roads, and everything else we want. So with that, I'll just say one last thing. Andrea mentioned a really good point about dissolving all ad hocs. I want to second that. I think we've now had an opportunity, or at least most of them on the dais, to see what it's like to be in the in-group and the out-group of these ad hocs. And I know, I will be frank, and I don't mean to be rude, but like the fact that we didn't have a renter on the ad hoc for housing made me feel uncomfortable because at the end of the day, most people that are involved in city council are always homeowners, but the city's majority renter. And I think anything we can do to really highlight and give everyone a voice in this dais is important. So those are my comments. Thank you again for letting me question and probe and discover things together. But overall, really, really happy with what you guys are doing. I know it's a tough job. I know it's hard hours. Everything we want to do really goes through you guys, for better or worse. But what I will say is, as Costa Mesa kind of realizes its vision that we have on the dais, I just want you guys to know that you are part of why that vision happens, and you're an integral part. Because I'll never forget this. On the council, we make policy decisions, but the staff is who implements them. So when we thank anyone, we should be thanking you guys. So thank you.
All right, wonderful. Arliss.
I think this makes us the West Wing over here. Thanks for chuckling, Lauren. Okay, nice to be back. Sorry about my voice. I'll try not to go on too long, given how it sounds. I was going to start, well, let me start, I'll add on to the comments related to ad hoc. I've been thinking the same thing, given kind of our experience with the ad hocs. Also, I think almost everything that this department has on its list of strategic initiatives are things that are really of citywide interest. So I agree with the recommendations to dissolve the ad hoc for housing and same thing for the FDC ad hoc. I had a few questions that I'm sort of characterizing as like, help me understand questions. I want to make sure I understood the presentation comments correctly. We'll start with Jennifer. I was shocked to hear in the presentation the suggestion that it's just with just 2 staff members, we can get this all done. Did I understand that right? I thought we were going to have to like double the size of this department for the next 3 years to get it all done.
No, let me clarify. Our request for the 2 staff members is something that's really necessary to have a division manager over the planning division who really runs day-to-day operations. Right now, Scott and I are sort of doing double duty as division managers as well as department director and assistant director. I think from a customer service perspective and a responsiveness perspective, it's much more desirable and really usual if you look at other cities and their structure to have a planning manager. So that's number one. And part of that is also in relation to the number of complex projects that we're really looking at taking forward and making sure that we have enough sort of seasoned staff to be able to move those forward and guide our new team members who will also, of course, be involved in these many endeavors. So I don't think it's 2 staff members to do everything that we've talked about. I think our goal this evening was to get feedback on your priorities so that the city manager and I can go back to the drawing board as to how to structure some teams and how to allocate staff time so that we can get your top priorities done. There is no way that we would be able to, even with the addition of the 2 staff positions, to do everything that we've discussed this evening. The community visioning and following up on all of our housing element rezoning, plus the commercial and industrial corridors, planning efforts and visioning efforts, those alone touch so many areas of the city. It really needs to be a phased approach, and it's something that my department's leadership team, along with the city manager's office, needed to further define pending feedback on council priorities.
Okay, so that I had expected tonight to hear, here's the percentage of sort of strategic initiatives that we need to, either drop or staff up significantly for. It sounds like that might still be coming because we do have, 47 programs in the housing element, and quite a few of these projects have specific deadline requirements, like FDC, for example. So, okay, so we have more work to do to sort of cull through this list beyond the priorities. Also, help me understand, in the presentation you described that we're at the highest levels ever for a lot of the kind of permit requests and applications and processing and so on. And I'm just sort of comparing that to what we've heard in the last few years about sort of a slowdown in a lot of development activity. So help me understand what those numbers are coming from. Is that because of ADUs or cannabis?
I think it's really interesting, the trends that we saw during the pandemic. We did not see a reduction in interest in development or really applications received or any of the normal indicators that we see for a development slowdown. What we saw was a change in the types of development that folks were submitting applications for, but the number of applications was very consistent. So during the pandemic, people seem to turn a little more internally. So we received a lot of residential additions and business tenant improvements, things that numbers were a little lower in past years, less sort of new development and new businesses. But it was very interesting to look at the numbers because the numbers were very consistent. And over the last 2 years, we've definitely seen an uptick in development interest.
Okay. I think that's good news.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Ziad, help me understand how an inspector does 60 site visits in a day. Like, what does that even look like?
Great question.
We have 5 full-time inspectors on board, and each of them will range from inspecting about 12 to 15 inspections per day. And when we say site inspection, that one site inspection, one site inspection can adds up or is comprised of maybe 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3 inspections. So when we say inspection visit, that visit may entail more than just one inspection. It can go up to 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 inspections simultaneously. So if you multiply 5 inspectors times an average of 12 inspection visits per day, that's about 60 inspections per day.
Okay, so maybe I read the stat wrong. I thought the slide said 60 site inspections per inspector per day.
No.
But I think okay.
Inspections per day.
I was wondering, I was like, man, these are quick inspections. Okay. That makes a lot more sense. So 12.
I did the math. There would have been 7.5 minutes per site inspection.
Not including travel time.
Yeah, I know. We were doing the same math.
Okay. Thank you. That helps me. Just going back to Jennifer, I think one thing that would be really helpful for me is kind of like a roadmap visual. I can send you an example of what I'm thinking of, but where we have sort of a list of our strategic projects and then kind of mapped out on a timeline of when I see some nodding, like when do they occur, the different stages, right, where there's community engagement, where there needs to be council action, where there's might be dependencies between a few different activities. I think that's going to be especially important with all of the housing element programs. I know I could sort of put that together with all of the information in the housing element document and in this presentation, but it would be really, really helpful for our council session and just kind of ongoing communication and updates about all of the special projects in this department, just to kind of know how things are laid out. And where there are required deadlines, of course, for a lot of this work. Okay, maybe I'll come back to this, but I'll just start with where I've been trying to sort of tally up what I think, or where my sort of interests are related to priorities. So, like I think everyone we've heard from so far, the community visioning and zoning related to FDC and Measure K, I think that really needs to start for a number of reasons. One that I haven't heard said yet is just to kind of follow through on the sort of reasoning and promises made related to the Measure K ballot item. I think it's really important to initiate the community visioning as soon as possible. I'm interested in hearing, we've heard from some council members about, well, let's not do them all at the same time. Let's do a few at a time. And that was my initial reaction too. I'm interested in hearing, was the plan or is the recommendation to do, what are the benefits for doing them all at the same time? Because that's what I understood from the staff report is that the proposal is to hire a contractor to do all of the Measure K visioning.
Yeah, so there are a few different ways that we could roll this out. The way that we had originally envisioned was to have essentially anytime you have a land use planning process, community visioning and outreach is always the first part of it. So the intent was always to really hire a high quality consultant team who has a lot of experience in community visioning and urban planning to take on that role and begin the land planning process with a community visioning effort. We tossed around actually a few different ways of structuring it, and that's something honestly that we're still working through because of the so many moving parts with all of the implementation measures. We've talked about separating the community visioning portion and starting with that, and then ultimately adding the land planning firms to the team and having them coordinate. That's another way that we could do it. I do like the feedback this evening about the trying to cluster together sort of adjacent locations, if you will, between FDC and Harbor, and having locations like that that makes sense to put them together, having those efforts be first. So it's certainly something that we'll take the feedback that we've received this evening and see if there's a different way that we can structure this to get moving faster.
Great. Yeah, I'd be interested in excuse me, continuing to explore the different strategies in terms of prioritizing the different areas. I do agree with the FDC and Harbor Boulevard sort of combo. That seems to make sense. I agree that Newport Boulevard is, long overdue and a high opportunity area given a lot of the current challenges along both sides of Newport. And then I'm also maybe selfishly interested in terms of the West Side cluster. I would think of the Placentia, Superior, 19th and 17th, kind of all of those connected corridors in a similar one. That's sort of our kind of downtown, more dense area, real good opportunity for walkability, and really good opportunities to connect to green spaces for a neighborhood that doesn't have much down there, especially with not only our existing resources at Fairview Park, but the new resource coming online at Banning Ranch. And I don't know the timing of opportunity zones, but I think there's some interesting opportunity, unique opportunity there in terms of planning. But I want us to also make sure to not lose the sort of citywide perspective. If we start to look at visioning and planning in a more segregated way, I just want to make sure we have a strategy to sort of look citywide, because we're not really that big a city. And we've talked in other forums about sort of the strategies of the 15-minute city, for example, right? And I want to make sure that we've got some approach to be making those connections across these different corridors and across areas of the city. That was just my first priority. Okay. Obviously, some housing element programs, many are required. Among the housing element programs that I'm particularly interested in are any of the ones that protect existing affordable homes. I think that's sort of an ongoing program, but I think that's really, really critical. We're seeing a pretty rapid decline in affordability in the city, and so protecting existing affordable stock is a high priority. Anything related to our renter community, our rental assistance programs, strategies to support renters, as a high priority. And then, as Mayor Pro Tem Harlan mentioned, the parking standards. As I understand, that's a huge constraint to affordable construction. So I'm really interested in moving that forward. The economic development, I'm really excited to hear that that's sort of ready to launch. I think that there's so much that's really unique about Costa Mesa, and I really like the components of that plan that focus on sort of our small business incubation, our creative community. Really excited to see that go forward. So that's a high priority for me in terms of that effort. And then I think of this as more sort of core work, but obviously implementation of the LMS, excuse me. I think getting that software in place is really critical and instrumental for everything that we're talking about. And then as similar to what Councilmember Chavez mentioned, really trying to stabilize our core work and getting these processes, kind of the regular management and processes on a clear schedule, getting the communication consistent. We want to hear really good feedback from the community about their experience in terms of access to information, communication, timelines, and so on. So the community visioning, a few, I mentioned my priorities with the housing element programs, LMS, economic development strategy, and then just really setting and investing in some strong practices, stabilizing our core work. Okay, I'm gonna just go back to a few specific questions that came up in the staff report in the presentation. So we'll start with Dan. What is the, you mentioned the Green Business Program. We've gotten a few emails on council about, I don't know if it's things being stalled there or business being interested in signing up in the program. What is the status of that, and are there needs to kind of keep that going forward?
Right, so the Green Business Network is a statewide initiative that's trying to help businesses that meet certain regulations and requirements to be noted and kind of recognized for their green business efforts. And it's site-specific. It has a lot of regulations that do with conservation and sustainable uses on site. The city partnered with the Green Business Network last year, received a grant to kind of a seed grant to kind of initiate this work. And in the process, we've been working with their colleagues and then a volunteer organization here in the city that's been helping us kind of chase after kind of a force multiplier. So we've got some volunteers that are going out and kind of letting people know about the fact that they can join this. Once they identify some of these organizations, we're also relying on them to help kind of organize and schedule those appointments. And then the intent is for our team, excuse me, our team to go out there and visit the site and go through the steps necessary and the checklist to kind of recognize them as a green business. Right now, this was something that was done in partnership with the Public Works Department when Salem was here. And so we're down a couple of people, so it's had a slow start. But we've recalibrated within our department temporarily and relying on some volunteers to help make sure we can move forward at a reasonable pace to meet the Green Business Network's kind of goals for our city.
Okay, so that sort of bottleneck from a few months ago is cleared, at least temporarily?
We're trying to address it as much as we can with the resources that we have, yeah.
Okay. Is the BAC still active?
Costa Mesa Business Assistance Collaborative is a partnership with our Travel Costa Mesa team, our South Coast Metro Alliance, and the Chamber. There's been some change-ups in the Chamber and some revisioning that needs to be done. We're working with our website administrator and kind of pulling back those tools and then refitting them so that we can proceed in the future with something a little bit more sustainable. The intent is to still use the website as a landing page for acknowledgements to recognize businesses in the community that are doing great work or are either a green business, a veteran-owned business, female-owned business. In fact, we've added questions to the LMS system when people are submitting for business licenses. When it goes live, these are questions we can ask them so we can gather that information and then plug it into the website. So we're looking at it from a kind of a holistic perspective, but right now it's a regroup phase.
Is that website's public?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take a look. I'll talk to you later about bike-friendly business program.
Okay.
And you mentioned some of the really amazing COVID business recovery efforts. Are any of those still ongoing, or are we past that, all of the kind of?
So we successfully implemented both grant programs and distributed all funds. The outreach is still conducted with every once in a while we do interviews with businesses, reach out to them. I have a visit scheduled for some businesses in the next week to go and visit them and see how they're doing. And we try to highlight some of those businesses at our marketing events or at ICSC that we'll be going to in May. So the outreach is still happening, just the scale of which it's happening is much less because we were able to reuse smartly some of our staff during COVID to kind of allocate, be a force multiplier, and now it's kind of gone back to normal status. So still outreach, just not as much.
Okay. One day. I'd be interested in just seeing, of the businesses that got grants, who's still around.
Oh, several.
Unless you know.
Yeah.
Well, I hope.
Yeah.
I hope.
No, yeah.
But I don't know if it's 100% or 90% or
Right.
whatever, and how that kind of compares to normal. But someday. And then how about the Shop Local program? And I'm thinking there might be something else you're referring to, but I'm also thinking in particular about the sort of startup project that we had funded. I want to say it was like $200,000 to sort of, give incentivized residents and community members to shop at local businesses. So what are we doing for Shop Local?
So there's two elements of, I think, I don't want to be confusing. There's a Shop Local program, which is basically encouraging our residents to shop locally. It's what we created branding for that and put it on several bus stops throughout the city, created flyers and pamphlets that were distributed by some of our volunteers during the COVID period. Afterwards, Shop Local materials are still provided on the Costa Mesa BAC website, and we're still encouraging people through our partners, the partners I listed there, to encourage people to shop locally. I think what you're referring to, however, is there was a partnership that was approved by City Council in regards to working with Colu to produce a more interactive or gamified app that would encourage those endeavors. That work has been placed on a lower priority level due to the importance that was placed and identified for the LMS and the Economic Development Strategic Plan.
Okay. Fidel, hi, good to see you. I think I just had one question for you. I do want to thank you in your presentation for talking about sort of the proactive community approach to your work. We talked once about the Neighbors for Neighbors program. This is something I remember participating in as a little kiddo in Costa Mesa. Is that something that you think it makes sense to bring back? I don't know much about the construction of the program or how it actually operated in the city, but I think it's related to what Councilmember Marr was bringing up in terms of leveraging volunteers to support residents in addressing code enforcement issues or other challenges.
So I believe in any resource that helps us in regards to addressing issues in the city, which, any blighted issues that are helping individuals who financially can't address some of the things we ask them to address is a great idea. And generally, through that program, we would bring forward some cases that we were having some issues, just going back to my comments about how we try to bring any resources. Like currently, we have some individuals go talk to the grant program to see if they can get grant funding to repair their issues on their properties. But if we are able to provide assistance where they don't have to go through an application process, it's more of a recommendation from staff that these are locations we'd really like to help repair and address some of the violations, certainly would be beneficial to the community.
So the Neighbors for Neighbors program, how was that different from what we do now? And maybe more importantly, is that something that you think would be valuable to bring back, given resource constraints and the issues that you're seeing in the community?
So currently, the resources we have are housed within development services. The Neighbors for Neighbors, I believe, often was held through like the HCD program. So certainly is separate from what we do in code enforcement, because we have a list of resources for people to be able to contact. But the Neighbors for Neighbors is a scheduled function that I think was done quarterly, and often brought along those resources that we have to help as part of it. So it's not a specific group, it's a combination of several different groups.
I'm not hearing you say, yes, we should try to bring that back.
Absolutely. Let me be clear. Yeah. I believe that any program, whether it's for Neighbors for Neighbors, if that's what you call it, I think there's other programs that are called Christmas in April. There are other organizations. It's just a matter of organizing and get it back up.
Yeah. Okay. I had one question for Nate. I don't know if this is going to land in your lap, but I'll start with Jennifer because she'll know what I was talking about. At the recent mobile home committee meeting, I was actually really surprised to learn that our rental assistance programs, we've created a couple in the past few years, do not cover our mobile home residents. And that's because they, own their home even though they're renting the space that their homes are on. I guess I don't really have a question, but I'm really interested in finding ways to make our rental assistance programs available to that community. When I voted for those programs, I fully expected that they would be available for those residents. I communicated to those residents that we had rental assistance programs. So if there's one change to those programs I'm really interested in is making those available to our mobile home community residents. I think the amounts that they're spending to rent the space that their mobile homes are on are pretty comparable to the amount that residents are spending for similarly sized housing units. Okay. I forget whose lap this falls in, but one of the things as I was reading, one thing in general I'd be interested in hearing back from the department, not tonight, but where are there areas, like is there work we're doing that we don't really need to do, right? Oftentimes there's different rules that may have made sense 10 years ago or 20 years ago that may not make sense now. One of the things that jumped out to me in the staff report, for example, was the annual updating of entertainment permits. And so my first thought is like, well, do we need to do that annually? Can we look at opportunities like that to say, hey, if someone has a entertainment permit, they haven't had any issues or complaints in the last year, like can we just do an auto renew so we're not processing those permits? I don't know if that's a good example because I don't know how much time is required, but that's just intended to give an example of, can we look at what we're doing on a regular basis to say, hey, maybe there's some places where we can relax our rules or reduce some of our requirements so that we can reduce the amount of paperwork or level of effort in terms of our regular work. I'd be really interested in hearing some ideas about that. I'm sure staff members who are doing this work on a day-to-day basis probably have some ideas. I know I do in my job, right? Of like, why are we doing this? Maybe there's a faster way, or maybe this is something that's not really providing value anymore. Okay. The only other thing I think I wanted to add, is Dan, you mentioned Salem, or the vacant position left by Salem, or sustainability manager, and I know that sits within Public Works. I think I think, although we haven't seen the work in front of council yet, we have a sort of intradepartmental sustainability team. Gosh, which one is it? A cross-cutting sustainability team that's starting to, kind of look at issues that cross our departments. And when I think of some of the most impactful ways to address sustainability, and in critical ways we need to address sustainability and in our community, a lot of it touches on the planning. And so I guess I don't really have a specific ask here, but something to think about, and maybe we can explore in a future conversation is how do we don't have anything in the presentation listed or in the staff report that like specifically mentions sustainability, but I think it does need to be one of those sort of overarching goals as we embark on the community visioning and planning and updates to our land use elements. So whether that's we fill that sustainability manager role with someone who has expertise in citywide planning, right? It's not just within the building, but kind of across an overall community. Maybe that's a role within planning where someone has that sustainability expertise. But I'll be asking and looking for how we're addressing and taking the opportunity to advance sustainability through our different planning efforts going forward. Okay, those are my comments. I'll add one more thing. Just so I was trying to look at, what I would cut or what I would delay. There's not a lot, but I'll throw some things out since I've heard. I love the outdoor dining. I think it's going well, so I don't see like urgency in formalizing that. I could see that. I think that's something that we can delay because what we have in place is fine. Happy to hear arguments the other way. I noted short-term rentals just as something that I didn't feel like was urgent to address, again, because I think we haven't heard a lot of complaints. I would certainly change my mind if the information from the consultant, said that there's a real revenue positive opportunity that was a good reason to move that forward more quickly. And then the first-time home buyers program, if we don't, I think that becomes valuable when there's enough money in the pot to make it valuable. So I don't, like Lauren mentioned earlier, I'm not sure what that pot looks like. Sorry, just realized the pun. It's not intentional. I don't know what that looks like, so that's something that could potentially be delayed. Okay, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to congratulate everybody on getting halfway through the study session. I haven't asked any questions or made any comments yet, and Councilmember Harper texted me about 50 questions, so I'll get through his. I'm just screwing with you. He didn't. Also, I'd like to congratulate all the people who bet the over on the number of times we'd used the word visioning in this meeting. We've used that a lot. I want to start there, okay, because it is a vague term. A very vague term. So let me just ask, I'll pick on Jennifer. What's your definition of visioning? Don't look it up. Don't Google it. I've Googled it. I've got it. But who cares? It's a dictionary definition. What's your definition?
Yeah, so I think this term can be interpreted in a number of different ways.
How do you interpret it?
With my urban planning background, the way that I interpret it is essentially establishing what the community standards are and community goals for a particular area of the city, using visuals to establish it. A lot of times you do that through architectural renderings or other tools like that, but using visual tools to communicate the council's vision in this particular case.
Okay. Okay. So the question I have for you is, at the city of Costa Mesa, for people that like Fidel, who are been around since he was the only code enforcement officer, and whoever else, even at your other agencies, have you ever done something called a visioning process?
I have. I think it's something that's become more common, especially when you're talking about corridor planning or area planning. It's a little bit different than standard community outreach, which is, getting the word out to the community and trying to get their feedback, ensuring that you're making the right connections in the community so that they're able to give feedback. This is a much more interactive process, a much more sort of visually engaging process than I think that we've done in the past for a lot of our planning efforts here in Costa Mesa.
Can you think of anything comparable to what we're talking about doing with respect to Measure K that we've done in Costa Mesa?
I cannot think of anything comparable that we've done in the past in Costa Mesa.
Okay. So my thinking on it, for what it's worth, which is probably not a lot, because I haven't done a visioning process. I've been sitting up here since 2016, and to my knowledge, we've done a lot of stuff, but we've never done that. I think to the extent possible, we should kind of decouple the process from the specific, the granular geographic area that we're talking about. I think that we, when you talk about renderings, you talk about specific sites, and some of the other council members have said, okay, well, I don't care about Bristol, but let's do Harbor, and let's do Harbor and FDC at the same time. I mean, I credit all that input, but I think it should be maybe in addition to that, a kind of a bigger context to say, what type of, what do we want? I mean, do we want multifamily housing? If we have high density housing, how dense? What do we want it to look like, just generally? Because I'm not sure there's a big difference between what that's going to look like on Harbor or on Bristol or on Newport Boulevard. Maybe I'm wrong, and that's all part of the visioning. People can chime in. If we do have multifamily housing, what do we want around it? Do we want commercial? We've talked about mixed use. Do we want aspects of it to be walkable? Do we want green space? Because I think if we come up with kind of a higher level idea of visioning, as opposed to what do we want on Bristol? What do we want on Harbor? What do we want north of the 405? Tied to the geography, then we'll be able to go out to the development community and say, these are the aspects of a development project that we would like to see, that we would be receptive to. And by we, I don't mean the council necessarily. I mean hopefully we'll get residents to participate. So I would, and then at that point in time, I think, and as quickly as possible, and by saying what I'm going to say right now, I don't mean that we should give it short shrift or be perfunctory about this effort, but I think in one fell swoop, we can address the requirement of Measure K, that we do a visioning process. So I don't see it being broken up geographically. Again, one person's opinion, okay? Not to say that we won't have discussions along the way to say, this works better on Harbor, this works better on Newport, this works better on Bristol, this works better north of the 405, this works better on Placentia, this works better on 18th or 19th. But I don't think we should break it up geographically, okay? There's that. With respect to almost all of these items, these individual projects, and everybody kind of settle in, because I do have a lot of things to talk about, okay? With respect to them, I think we need to, apart from the visioning, which I think we've all established that it's a unique thing that we don't do very often, and we in fact haven't done it yet, and we certainly haven't done it in the last 7 years since I've been on council. Other than that, when we talk about things like the inclusionary housing ordinance, I think we should establish some type of a rhythm in terms of how we get our community input, okay? And I want to make a suggestion with respect to the inclusionary housing ordinance. And I noticed like the goal was to get it done or get something done. I could turn to it, but by the end of the year. And I think if we did something like this, and I'm just going to throw it out here to you, I think we'd have an inclusionary housing ordinance, definitely first reading by Memorial Day, okay? Here's what we do. First of all, I'm super disappointed that everybody stole my thunder here on getting rid of the ad hoc committees, okay? And I can tell you, Kim, did I not call you today and say I was going to put that on the next agenda? Brenda, didn't I say that? Yeah, they all got to go, in my opinion. Yep. Okay. They all have to go, okay? So in terms of the inclusionary housing ordinance, there are inclusionary housing ordinances that work all over the place. I mean, I remember Andrea sent us a thing recently that said there's these, models that OCOG has put out and SCAG has put out, but we don't even need to go that far. We can go to Irvine. Irvine has a fairly effective, I think, everybody seems to say that that's a model. I mean, we could go, and I know this is going to sound elementary and I'm oversimplifying it. We could go to the folks at Irvine and say, send us a Word document. We could do a search and replace Irvine with Costa Mesa. We'd have a first draft, right? Then you go through it and say, what is different about Costa Mesa than Irvine? What doesn't work? And we work through that. Let's say that takes a week. Okay, and I'd say, like at my law firm, if I were to assign that to somebody, I'd give them less than a week. Then you have a joint study session with the kind of rough draft that we've basically cobbled off of Irvine, plagiarized. And you put it in front of the city council, you put it in front of the planning commission, you say, here it is, what do you think? Of course, everybody's invited to come to the study session, give everybody 3 minutes, invite the building community, invite the trades, invite the community, and say, what do you think about this? You get the feedback from it, make your adjustments, run it through the planning commission, they make their adjustments, you get it to the city council, that's it. We have something to vote on, okay? Along the way, we're gonna make changes, but what I'm trying want you to think about is there's so many resources out there that so many things that are off the shelf. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I'd like to see us do that as much as we could and just get something in front of the planning commission, get something in front of the city council. And now I will say something like going back to Measure K, I think one of the issues with Measure K that got us a little in trouble was we tried too hard to make it too good before we released it into the wild, okay? And so at the end of the day, we were making changes up here, as you might remember, right and left, on the day that we decided to put it on the ballot. And I want to learn from that experience and say, let's not tighten the screws too tight or expect too much of an evolved product before it gets to the deliberative bodies. That takes pressure off the staff because the expectation of this like perfect level work where it's going to be a 7-0 vote and a 7-0 vote, very few comments. Let's say we don't have that expectation because it's human nature of the planning commission and certainly the city council, as tonight has proven, that we want to add our value. So trying to get it exactly right, it takes a lot of time and it's not time that, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of work, but in the end of the day, it could be streamlined, okay? That's my suggestion and how we can get an inclusionary housing ordinance by Memorial Day. I do want to talk a little bit about cannabis. And I have my thoughts on it, and I actually think that I don't want to talk too much about it. I could talk for a half an hour about cannabis. But I want to kind of level set on it, and I do think that we just need to have some type of policy that comes before the city council, and we all have to be able to weigh in. Again, kind of similar to what I said about the inclusionary housing ordinance. I mean, the cannabis comes from Measure Q, which passed by 65% of the vote, okay? And then, by the way, we didn't work on the ordinance for a year. The ordinance, there was an ad hoc committee that worked on the measure as well and brought that to the city council. Again, then it got passed with virtually no opposition, very popular, as I said, by 65%, 35%. We talk about mandates. Some of the people, we heard that term thrown around, a clear mandate of the voters of the city council to move forward with this project. And in response to that clear mandate, then we put together our ordinance. We did do many Zoom calls, as you might remember, with the industry and interested people, where again, we put a draft ordinance in front of them to comment on. They did comment on it. We got some level of consensus from the industry. We took it to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission made their decisions. Then and only then did the ad hoc committee really, because after we got, I remember this like it was yesterday, after we got the staff report, I'd say it wasn't a lot of time, but it was a very intense amount of time that we spent making amendments, suggested amendments to what was included in the staff report. And that's the part that seemed like it was dumped on the council, and I get it. But it's not like we were hiding, working on the, and it was, it wasn't involved. I mean, it was vetted through the Planning Commission. I remember when I was on the Planning Commission, I voted on it. So went through that whole process. We go forward. Applications are taken. We make a concerted decision to let the marketplace rule cannabis. As a result of that, the private sector has invested millions of dollars in our city, and it's taken a lot of time. I get it, but it has a lot of benefits. It has not only the benefits of revenue, which I think are overstated here. It has the benefits. Remember where we were, as Fidel pointed out and Jennifer pointed out, we had trap shops, 30 trap shops that were sucking up our time in code enforcement and police. They were selling to children products that we have no idea what they were selling, and we weren't getting anything from them. Those trap shops have largely dried up, okay? In response to that, the vision was we would have numerous legal cannabis businesses with well-paying jobs selling a legal product to adults, and we would use that to deter illegal trap shops and also use it as a channel, a retail channel, for the benefit of our Measure X businesses that have already invested in our city. And that was all part of the history of this. So now we go through and we have a new thing that happens, Measure K, and all the housing discussions that we're having. And we have a kind of a values policy-driven, apparently, discussion about let's throttle back because certain people up here who are talking about it in conversations and in fits and spurts think that it shouldn't be as high a priority as other things that are in your staff report. But I mean, I liken it to this. We wouldn't stop the land management system in the middle of the process. We wouldn't stop a public works project in the middle of the process. And by going down to one per month, we are effectively slowing it down to a trickle. We're affecting people that have already invested millions of dollars in our community, that are willing to invest more into corridors that are dying, and they're the only ones that are going to put money into our commercial retail sector. And they're proving that they're willing to do it. You can see it anywhere you drive around the city of Costa Mesa. It just hasn't come to fruition yet. And when it does, it's also going to create housing. It's going to create housing opportunities. It's going to create opportunities for public art. It's going to create a safer, more prosperous, more beautiful city. So I think we need to have a discussion and invite the public in and say, what do we value? What do we value? And it shouldn't be a discussion that's made, a decision that's made at a retreat that's held in the middle of the day. It shouldn't be made at a study session, and it absolutely should not be made at an ad hoc committee meeting. I guarantee you that. We should invite the public in and have a policy discussion about this. Okay, that's what I think we should do. I'm not supportive of one a month. That's all I have to say about cannabis. Okay, I'm going to talk about some stuff, and I'm just asking these questions because I get a lot of feedback. And Ziad, I've got a question for you. Okay, and I just never get a chance to ask these questions. A piece of feedback that I get from the community frequently is one inspector comes out, they give me one piece of information and maybe even sign off on something. And another inspector comes back out at another time and gives information that is different than what the first inspector does. And it either slows down my project or makes it more expensive or whatever. What do we do, if anything, to ensure that there's consistency so that the public doesn't get inconsistent feedback from inspectors?
That's a very good question, Mayor Stevens, but once an inspector pass the inspection process, when he goes to inspect, for example, concrete or plumbing or electrical elements or stuff, when the element is passed, then the other inspector cannot bring back that subject again because he can see it in the computer that it has already passed. And we have a procedure in-house that we don't create conflicts. We try to invest in progress and to move forward. So I find that is a little bit inaccurate of what that they're saying, because when the inspection is processed and passed, the other inspector cannot rehash that inspection again and say, this is not done correctly or what have you.
Well, I just had a constituent tell me today that she built an ADU.
Okay.
And the ADU was signed off on, and it was built, and it was certified to be occupied. And then months later, somebody from the city came and said it needs fire sprinklers, and so they have to rip out the drywall and put in fire sprinklers.
The fires, well, no. I think if the building permit application and the plans have been approved with no indication on the plan that it requires a sprinkler, then she is not required to have sprinklers.
Okay.
But oftentimes the requirement of the sprinkler is denoted on the plans. And if that's the case, and oftentimes the sprinkler requirements, they are typically a deferred item. They can have it after the fact to be implemented.
Okay.
So if I'll check the plans for you personally.
Who can I refer this person to?
To me,
Okay,
myself.
good.
Give her my number and I'll look into that case and I'll check the plans and we can help her.
Okay. All right. Do we use, this is kind of mentioned by, Arliss, do we use like PERT charts or project tracking in the department? Gantt charts, those types of things?
We do, for particularly for long-range planning projects that have a longer timelines associated with them. We use project planning tools, including milestone schedulers, various project management tools like that. Yeah.
Okay. And is that something that you can share that with council members if they have questions about, like, where are we at, where are we going, what timing is occurring on this particular project, one of these projects we're talking about?
We can always share timelines with council, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go through and do some high priority, low priority. Accessory dwelling units, making that point, low priority. Short-term rentals program, low priority. First-time home buyers program, I don't think that should be done by this department. I think it should be done by a third-party administrator, similar to rental assistance, and I'm not even sure that this department should oversee it. Outdoor dining ordinance, low priority. A lot of these things are related. Community visioning, Fairview development, I've already told you about that. Senior center housing project, high priority. Oh, I forgot one, but the first one here, let's see if I can get to it. Oh, retail cannabis program, high priority. Economic develop strategic plan. Sorry, Dan. By the way, Dan's a hero in my book. I think your whole department basically was instrumental in getting us through the pandemic, saving countless number of businesses, and getting us to the position where we could have the type of financial results that we saw at our last meeting. That's you guys that did that. And working, of course, with the taxpayers and the private sector. But the support you gave was incredible, okay? Having said that, I view economic development strategic plan as a lower priority only because, to the extent that it's an academic look, I like all the other stuff. I like streamlining, all that stuff, but I don't think we need to look at it at like a big picture. Oh, what are we going to do? Here's our plan. We're going to go forward, as opposed to just being nimble and getting there and doing it. Let's change our parking, change our parking ordinance. Let's whatever we can do. Let's default to yes. Let's get these businesses going, right, and be responsive. But again, I can't say enough of your whole department, but especially you, Dan, the work that you did to keep businesses alive. You saved lives. See if I have anything else. Oh, I don't know whether we have them or not, but I think it would be good to have objective standards and what did we call them again? Performance indicators on just simple responsiveness. There's a lot of times where I know you guys are doing, and this happens in my field as well, where we're doing really good work, but like we're not telling the client about it. You know what I'm saying? And the people, like, believe it or not, the cannabis applicants are our client, so, or whoever the client is. We're doing the work, but the communicating and kind of keeping people up to date is something I think we could have some performance indicators. So, like, if you get an email, respond by X day, right? And if you get a phone call, you're going to call them back at this period of time, and then track that. If we have an area, I live by the timesheet. If we have an area, and I don't want you guys to do it. You haven't chosen that terrible life. But if we get into a situation where we feel bogged down, I think we should consider doing that on a spot by spot basis. For example, going back to cannabis, when we say we're spending so much time on cannabis applications, to track exactly how that time is spent by whatever, the quarter of an hour or whatever, then we could go back and say, this is an area where we can improve our efficiency, or we can communicate better with the applicants and get more information, and that might help us. I don't have anything else.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. John, can I still be John?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
For the city attorney, what is our current policy for council members agendizing items? Do I need
There is a policy that a council member can make a request for an item to be agendized. If it will take less than 4 hours of preparation time, they can make that request of staff of the city manager. If it's going to take more than 4 hours, it goes on to an agenda for council direction.
So I'd like to agendize no later than March 21st, a proposal to bring back only one cannabis application per month to provide more time for staff to focus on the priorities as discussed tonight. Thank you.
I'll second that. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Jeff?
I do. Thanks, John. So, talking about visioning, which seems so ambiguous and amorphous, I think it actually is a little bit more concrete than we'd like to believe. And I would suggest, as someone who's done these processes and been part of planning efforts, it is unfair and unrealistic to ask people just the broad question, what do you want? That's not where visioning starts. And it's not necessarily an iterative process. And I think cannabis is actually a good example, John. You raised about how ad hoc committee worked with the industry, came up with an ordinance, It has to be more collaborative from the beginning. So it can't be a matter of community, what do you want, and then hand it over to the development community and say, go make it happen. It has to be a much more collaborative and integrated effort. So respectfully, I think if we're going to approach visioning, there's got to be a recognition that there are constraints, whether they're regulatory or environmental, or the fact that somebody owns a piece of property and wants to develop it. That's sometimes a tough pill for people to swallow, but I think that's the baseline from which we need to start. So that's just my editorial comment on visioning.
Yes, Arliss.
I'll add one other quick thing. The suggestion that we do sort of visioning across the whole city, again, how we sort of contract for it, I don't know. I think there's a lot of creative ways to do, but I just wanted to add that I think it's really, really, really critical that there's sort of locational specific visioning. There's a lot, what people who choose to live in one part of the city are interested in how they're sort of interested in experiencing the city may be very different from people in another part of the city. And that's a lot of what makes Costa Mesa really unique. So I think it's really important through the visioning process. I do think it's it's an engagement. I think the visuals are important. We talked in the crafting of Measure K and some of the language there about the importance of sort of being in that space when you're having those discussions. It's not something that we can do out of City Hall. So I just want to add in that for me, it's very important that the visioning in different areas of the city are distinct for those areas of the cities. How it's contracted, I don't know if that's the best approach, right? Whether it's all the same contractor, I don't know. But there needs to be some geographic specific visions.
Okay. Hey, did you have something else?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
So I no, I totally agree with that. And I think that the point I forgot to make, which I think is the more salient one, is simply that there is no value in just having a vision that's going to be written in a book and it's going to sit there. The whole point of visioning is to realize it. And that's something that the community ultimately benefits from. So, the purpose of visioning and planning is to actually guide, in this case, development. There's really no point in having an excellent plan that can't be effectuated. So we have to be realistic, but I want to stress the driver of all visioning should be aspirational. What do we want to have happen within a certain parameters, and who's going to make it happen? Those are the key questions that need to be answered.
I had one other thing that I forgot. Fidel, let me ask you this question because it came up when you had the pictures of the hoarders. I'm just curious, do we have any mental health professionals that are employed by the city or that we contract with that provide outreach to people who are at risk or having these issues that you identified or any other similar issues?
Well, excuse me, the city does have individuals. We don't, and maybe Nate can help me with this.
Because I want to hear, Nate, about what we have, because I know we do have them, but it seemed like they were primarily directed toward helping with people that are homeless. But it occurs to me that there are people that have homes that have also profound mental health issues. And I've never heard that there's crossover. Nate, I got to heat up your mic. I've never heard that there's crossover in that effort.
Yes, sir. One of the outreach workers that's employed by the city, her name's Rosemary, is a licensed clinical social worker, an LCSW, that actually specializes in hoarding. So when we have cases like that, they are referred to her. She's part-time, she's full-time with the city of Buena Park, so she has other commitments, but she does avail some of her time to our residents as well. We are working toward, as one of the council priorities, some mental health, behavioral health services, more augmented. So we are working toward that, but there's nothing concrete just yet.
I remember talking about that at our last session about one of the neighboring cities had like a van that could go out and they had mental health professionals that would help both homeless folks and people that are housed that are suffering. And I'd like to discuss that at the retreat and maybe bring it up in the context of the budget. Okay? All right, I don't have anything else. Anybody else have anything? Don? No? Okay.
I have one last comment, John.
Yes.
It's not in relation to anything else discussed right now. I actually fully agree with Jeff's point of view on visioning. It's about aspirations. But I just want to make a quick note that we still haven't done a PR campaign for my Costa Mesa in Spanish with the Spanish-speaking communities. Oftentimes, it's what's that Costa Mesa, that's all the issues that we see go on the app, like tagging, like large items out on the street. So I think just having a PR campaign at some point in the year will be helpful to target Spanish speakers. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. We are adjourned.
No,
nothing
sorry,
from
Mayor.
staff?
Mayor, I have
Sorry.
some comments.
Yes, of course.
If I may. Thank you. Thank you, Council, for all of your feedback this evening. We're going to take the feedback that we received on priorities. We'll put that all together and bring it at the strategic planning retreat just for a final look-see, just to make sure that we're on the same page, that we can do the work plan for the remainder of the year. But it's been really helpful to get all of your feedback on the priorities and why. So I think that's been really helpful and informative. I did have two things that I wanted to touch on before we depart this evening. One is, when it comes to, I heard a lot about customer service tonight, and I want to make sure that when we're having this conversation, that we're actually having a fact-based conversation. I think that's really important. And so I think that there are going to be business owners and there are going to be residents that are going to be unhappy with our level of service. And that's a normal part of the job. Based on the numbers that we have, that is not the majority of the experience for people when they're coming to our counter. It's not the majority experience for our residents. It's not the majority experience for our businesses. The most beautiful thing about this Wait While app is that it gives us detailed information about visits, what's happened, what was done, permits that were issued, plan checks that were reviewed, inspections that were conducted, and how long people had to wait to actually see the planner and how long that visit was. That is factual information. That's factually based information. So this department has actually processed more in the last year, in 2022, than ever. It was a banner year, in large part due to the fact that through your assistance as well, we were able to get some of those vacancies filled. At one time, an all-time high of, I think it was 9, and then we were able to get it down. It's down to 3 now, but between the compensation changes and then also adding staff, which we did for cannabis in particular, and we have these 2 asks as well, we've been able to really move the needle there. But we would all be remiss if we walked away from this conversation this evening with fact-based information, with a different impression. I do believe that the experience with the cannabis launch, right, has been difficult. It's been a challenging implementation, a lot of applications, a brand new program in the midst of everything else that's going on, and many other really high priority projects happening simultaneously, many of them driven by the state, but some even just from the work that we have to do on a day-to-day basis. But to walk away thinking that this department is not as productive or is not even more productive is just not, that's not what's in the numbers. The department is more productive, it's also more efficient. It's doing more in a shorter period of time. And so the automations that we have coming in place will improve this exponentially, especially with LMS. We're really excited about that. The concierge service that we've put in place has really helped all of these efforts. And so between the compensation changes, the increased staffing that we've put in, the automation through the LMS program, and also the Wait While app that has also assisted, that's just the beginning. But I don't want the experience of a specific industry or sector that we just started implementing and have only been doing for really since June, at a record pace at that, to kind of blind us to what's actually happening day to day from lots of residents, thousands of plan checks getting done, thousands of inspections, many permits issued, businesses across every single sector, for that to cloud what's really happening on the ground. So I think that would do everybody a disservice, especially a team that is incredible and is literally working around the clock to get a lot of this done. So that's the first point. And we shared those numbers with you. They're in the PowerPoint, and we'll make sure that you get PowerPoints in advance. We were working on this one till the very last minute, and so we apologize for that. I did want to mention that on the housing inclusionary ordinance, that work started a long time ago. When we did the community survey, there was specific feedback that we got there that led us to actually put that a little bit on the back burner and just focus all hands on deck on Measure K. God, I hope that none of you believe that we wouldn't check other cities' ordinances as a starting point, because that's such a basic thing that we would do as staff, as professionals, that I was stunned to hear that. So rest assured that the first thing we do whenever we're going to do something new is check to see who did it first, who's doing it really well, and can we gather all of that from all of those cities, pick the best from everything we can, and then think about how it applies to Costa Mesa and then bring it to you. If we're not doing that basic level of analysis and research, then we have some serious problems. So I want to just please rest assured that at a minimum, we do that. And so the housing inclusionary ordinance, we've got a lot of headwind on that, and we will be bringing that as well. But that was deliberately placed on hold, given some of the community survey feedback that we got when we were looking at Measure K. And then last but not least, on the issue of the cannabis implementation moving forward. So you're going to have to help me with a little bit of a procedural issue and also a role issue that I have. And that is, I've shared that information with you about the 1 a month, and we've had conversations about it because of all the other priorities that we have. But typically, as a city manager, I'm not asking for your approval respectfully, because that's what you hire me to do, is to assess your priorities and then decide how we're going to staff it. The 1 a month we got kind of specific about, it might be 2 a month. I don't want to bring that for a vote only because, and if you insist on it, I will, but let's just talk through one quick scenario. Let's say we can do 2 a month. Let's say we can do 3, because there happens to be a downtime with the state law implementation, the visioning's not yet started, and housing inclusion ordinance still needs a little bit of work, but we just have that little opening where we can do a few more. I don't want to be in a position where I've got to bring it back just to change it for that. And so really the intent of the conversation with the 1 a month was to say, we're going to pivot. It's a significant change from what we were doing previously because there's other work that needs to be done. But the staffing of how we implement your vision, your priorities, that rests solidly with the city manager. And so I'm concerned about if we needed to change that, I've got to bring it back. It's got to go through a bunch of departments, bring it on an agenda, and by then it's 3 weeks later because there's such a lead time to get you things. I think what we're hearing from you is, from the majority, is let's really start shifting the focus to some of these other priorities. We've implemented a number of these cannabis projects, and I would say let's see how that goes, and then we can revisit the conversation. But I didn't ask approval to do 3 to 5 a month. We did that because you told us try to get it done as quickly as we can. And so you give me general direction and I implement that. But it's not at the level of this is how much you're going to process of this particular business every single month. We don't do that for any other business sector, and I would strongly recommend against us doing it here. We don't decide how many restaurants we're going to process or how many pizzerias or how many retail outlets. It's just not, I just don't think it's the best path forward, to be honest. And so.
Well, obviously we don't have a restaurant voted by the people, program that we're launching. So I just think it makes sense for the staff to get council direction and and have the public be able to participate. So I agree
Yes.
with I agree with Andrea.
Well, if we're not going to, sorry, yeah.
Of course.
If you don't want to bring the policy, that's fine. Let's bring the whole ordinance then, right? I mean, at this point, there is not consensus on this council. I mean, I don't feel any consensus on this council as far as what we're doing with cannabis and how much staff time it takes and how many resources we're willing to dedicate.
I prefer
And
if
there's
we're going
certainly
to
not
have a conversation, it should be at the ordinance level, but it should not, absolutely not be at the day-to-day operational level. Otherwise, I mean, I would need to bring you everything. We're going to have 3 police officers.
No. I'm not suggesting you do
Specific areas.
I'm not suggesting you do that. There's no consensus on this council, and there's no consensus, frankly, in the community in terms of what it is that we want. So it's really hard to direct staff on how much resource we should be dedicating if, like, we can't agree where it falls on the priority. I mean, other than the mayor, I didn't hear anybody else say that retail cannabis was like one of their top 3 issues that they wanted to deal with. So, I mean, however you want, I'll leave it to you and the city attorney to figure out how you bring it. I've been asking to bring the ordinance back for 2.5 months now. And I recognize that I don't think there's consensus on council to even bring the ordinance back. So I don't care. I mean, it could just be a blank agenda item for all I care and like let the public weigh in on what they think is happening right now. But I would like to have a public discussion about it because it is very frustrating to me that the idea that an entire division of our city has been dedicated to this one issue. If I look at these priorities, I've been advocating for an inclusionary housing ordinance for 7 years now, right? Like, I was the main point of contact for our short-term rental stuff for most of the public. Half of these priorities are things that I've been wanting to do for 4 years, and I can't do them because we're talking about cannabis all the damn time.
All right, I'm going to let that be the last word. Let's adjourn.